Before you drift into dreams tonight, let me tell you a story. Not just any story, but the greatest story ever told in a galaxy far, far away. It spans generations, crossing the vastness of space and time, weaving together the destinies of heroes and villains, fathers and sons, masters and apprentices. This is the tale of the Skywalker family, whose choices shaped the fate of trillions across countless worlds. Long ago, before the events that would shake the galaxy to its core, the Jedi Order maintained peace. For 1,000 generations, these guardians of light served the Republic, wielding an ancient energy called the Force. The Force flows through all living things, connecting the galaxy in ways both seen and unseen. Those sensitive to its presence could perform feats beyond imagination, moving objects with their minds, sensing the emotions of others, even glimpsing fragments of the future. But the Force has two sides. The light side, championed by the Jedi, draws power from peace, knowledge, and serenity. The dark side feeds on anger, fear, and aggression, offering quick power to those willing to surrender their humanity for strength. The Jedi had long ago driven their ancient enemies, the Sith, into hiding. The Dark Lords waited in shadows, nursing their hatred across centuries, planning their revenge, and when that revenge finally came, it would begin with a single boy on a desert world, a child born unlike any other. The Chosen One awakens. The twin suns of Tatooine blazed mercilessly over endless dunes of sand. This remote planet in the Outer Rim territories was a harsh place, controlled not by law, but by the criminal Hutt clans who ruled through fear and greed. In the dusty settlement of Mos Espa, among the moisture farmers and scavengers who eked out desperate lives, lived a boy named Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was 9 years old, with sandy blonde hair that hung across his bright blue eyes that seemed to hold depths far beyond his years. He lived with his mother, Shmi Skywalker, in quarters attached to a junk shop owned by a flying Toydarian dealer named Watto. Both mother and son were slaves, property owned by Watto, their lives dictated by his whims and temper. It was a hard existence, but Shmi raised her boy with love and gentleness, teaching him compassion even in a place where weakness was punished. The boy possessed an extraordinary gift. Without knowing it, Anakin could touch the Force, feeling its currents flow through him. This connection manifested in uncanny reflexes and an intuitive understanding of machines that shouldn't have been possible for someone so young. He could pilot pod racers, dangerous vehicles that killed most humans who attempted to control them at such blistering speeds. He built droids from salvaged parts, including a protocol droid he called C-3PO, assembling the golden automaton piece by piece in the sparse hours between his chores. But Anakin's greatest quality, the thing that truly set him apart, was his heart. Despite being a slave, despite never knowing freedom, he dreamed of helping others. When he found precious parts in the junk heaps, parts he could have used for himself, he gave them away to fix the medical center's generator. He befriended other outcasts and showed kindness, even when cruelty would have been safer. His mother had told him stories at night, tales of sun dragons and distant worlds, nurturing the hope that somehow, someday, they might escape this place. Fate arrived on Tatooine in the form of unexpected visitors. A Queen starship, damaged and in need of repairs, made an emergency landing near Mos Espa. Aboard were Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi master with long hair and a serene presence, his Padawan apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the young Queen of Naboo, Padme Amidala, traveling in disguise as a simple handmaiden. They needed hyperdrive parts that they couldn't afford, stranded far from their homeworld while dark forces gathered strength. When they entered Watto's shop seeking these parts, Anakin met them with curiosity and eagerness. The boy immediately connected with Padme, sensing a kindness in her that matched his mother's. Qui-Gon, meanwhile, sensed something else entirely. During a routine conversation, the Jedi Master noticed Anakin's impossible reflexes and his preternaturally calm demeanor. Later, when he secretly tested the boy's blood, Qui-Gon's eyes widened in astonishment. The test revealed over 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell in Anakin's blood, higher than even Grandmaster Yoda, higher than any Jedi in the Order's history. Midi-chlorians were microscopic life forms that lived within all cells, and those with high concentrations could touch the Force. Anakin's count was beyond anything thought possible. Qui-Gon believed he had discovered something prophesied in ancient Jedi texts, the Chosen One, a being conceived by the Force itself, destined to bring balance. Shmi confirmed what Qui-Gon suspected. Anakin had no father. She had simply become pregnant, a miracle she couldn't explain. The boy was a virgins in the Force, perhaps created by it for purposes beyond mortal understanding. Ancient prophecy spoke of one who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. Could this slave child be that prophesied savior? Qui-Gon devised a plan to free Anakin. Watto loved gambling almost as much as he loved money, and the upcoming Bunta Eve Classic pod race offered the perfect opportunity. Qui-Gon wagered that if Anakin won the race, the boy would go free. The Toydarian, convinced no human child could win such a dangerous competition, eagerly accepted. The race itself was a nightmare of speed and violence. 6 massive engines screamed across canyons and through narrow passes, pilots jockeying for position at speeds that turned landscapes into blurs. The champion racer, a violent dog named Sebulba, tried every dirty trick to eliminate his competitors, including young Anakin. But the boy's connection to the Force guided his instincts, allowing him to sense dangers before they appeared. When his pod racer's engines exploded from Sebulba's sabotage, Anakin managed to ignite them again through a combination of skill and impossible luck. He crossed the finish line first, the only human to ever win a pod race. The crowd erupted in shock and celebration. Watto, true to the wager, granted Anakin his freedom. But there were not enough winnings to also free Shmi. The mother and son faced a terrible choice. Anakin could escape slavery and pursue a greater destiny, but it meant leaving his mother behind. In their final moments together before departure, Shmi knelt before her son, her hands on his small shoulders, tears streaming down her face. She told him to be brave, to make the most of this opportunity, to become the person she knew he could be. Anakin's resolve crumbled, and he ran back to embrace her one final time, promising through his sobs that he would return. He would come back and free her. He swore it. As the ship carrying Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin lifted away from Tatooine's scorched surface, the boy pressed his face against the viewport, watching his mother's figure shrink below. That image would haunt him, the memory of leaving her behind, a wound that would never truly heal. The seeds of fear were planted deep. Fear of loss, fear of helplessness, fear of being unable to save those he loved. The Council's judgment and a menace revealed. The journey to Coruscant, the Republic's capital world, should have been one of wonder for young Anakin. The planet was an entire world covered in city, billions of beings from 1,000 species living in towering structures that reached toward the clouds. The Jedi Temple itself rose from the cityscape like an ancient mountain, its 5 spires reaching skyward, containing within its walls the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years. But Anakin felt cold on Coruscant. The ship's temperature was nothing like Tatooine's constant heat, and deeper still, a coldness touched his heart. He was leaving behind everything familiar, everyone he loved, to embrace an uncertain future. Qui-Gon tried to comfort the boy, speaking of the Force and the Jedi path with quiet enthusiasm, but uncertainty gnawed at Anakin's insides. The Jedi Council convened to evaluate this unusual case. 12 of the Order's wisest masters sat in a circular chamber, their chairs arranged in a ring, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Coruscant's endless cityscape. Master Yoda, ancient beyond measure, with green skin and pointed ears, watched Anakin with eyes that seemed to see straight through to the boy's soul. Master Mace Windu, his dark skin and stern expression radiating authority, sat across from Yoda, equally skeptical. Qui-Gon presented his case with passionate conviction. He described Anakin's midi-chlorian count, his lack of a father, his raw talent and connection to the Force. The boy was the chosen one, Qui-Gon insisted, the one foretold in prophecy. The Council must allow him to be trained. But the Council saw what Qui-Gon in his excitement overlooked. They administered tests, probing Anakin's mind and heart. They found a boy of great potential, yes, but also a boy riddled with fear. Fear for his mother, fear of his own inadequacy, fear of the future. Master Yoda spoke the fateful words that would echo through the decades. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Much fear in you, I sense? The Council's judgment was harsh, but unanimous. Anakin was too old to begin training, already 9 years when most Padawans started as infants. More critically, his attachments and fears made him vulnerable to the dark side. They would not train him. Qui-Gon's face fell, but he maintained his composure. He had given his word to the boy, made a promise, and Qui-Gon Jinn kept his promises. The political situation that had brought them to Coruscant demanded immediate attention. Naboo, Padmé's homeworld, had been invaded by the Trade Federation, a corporate entity with its own droid army. The Federation blockaded the planet, landed troops, and tried to force the Queen to sign a treaty legitimizing their occupation. Behind this crisis lurked a darker hand, one the Jedi sensed but couldn't yet see clearly. Senator Palpatine of Naboo, an older man with gentle features and a grandfather's warm manner, took particular interest in young Anakin. He spoke to the boy kindly, saying he would watch his career with great interest. There was something in Palpatine's eyes when he looked at Anakin, something calculating behind the warmth, but no one noticed. The senator seemed only a concerned representative trying to help his planet. Queen Amidala decided to return to Naboo and face the invasion directly. The Jedi Council, against their better judgment, assigned Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to protect her. When the Queen's ship prepared to depart, Anakin had nowhere else to go, so he traveled with them, back toward danger and an uncertain fate. During their escape from Naboo, the ship came under attack. In the hangar, as blaster fire erupted around them, Anakin climbed into an empty starfighter for safety. He accidentally triggered the autopilot, and the fighter launched into space, drawn into the massive space battle raging above the planet. Anakin's hands flew over controls he'd never touched before, his force sensitivity guiding his actions. When Trade Federation vulture droids pursued him, the boy maneuvered through explosions and laser fire with impossible skill. Through a combination of that same force-guided instinct and luck, Anakin fired his weapons at precisely the right moment, his torpedoes striking the Trade Federation control ship's main reactor. The explosion was catastrophic, and with the control ship destroyed, every battle droid on Naboo's surface shut down simultaneously. A 9-year-old slave boy had just won a war. But the true battle, the one that would set the stage for decades of conflict, occurred in a plasma refinery on Naboo's surface. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had encountered a Sith Lord, a warrior of terrifying skill wielding a double-bladed crimson lightsaber. His face was marked with intricate red and black tattoos, his yellow eyes blazing with dark side power. This was Darth Maul, apprentice to a Sith master who remained hidden in the shadows. The duel was graceful and deadly, 3 lightsabers weaving patterns of light and death. Maul's fighting style was aggressive and acrobatic, driving the 2 Jedi back step by step. When the plasma gate separated them temporarily, each warrior prepared for the next exchange. The gates opened again, and the fight resumed with renewed intensity. Maul's blade found its mark. Qui-Gon, caught by a moment's hesitation, took the lightsaber through his torso. The Jedi Master collapsed, the strength leaving his limbs. Obi-Wan screamed in rage and anguish, charging forward, but Maul was ready. The Sith Lord used the Force to push Obi-Wan into a pit, where the young Padawan barely caught himself on a projecting nozzle, his lightsaber falling away into the darkness below. Dangling above certain death, Obi-Wan watched helplessly as Maul stood over his fallen master, taunting him, but the young Jedi centered himself, pushing past his rage and grief to find calm within the chaos. In one explosive moment, he called Qui-Gon's lightsaber to his hand with the Force, vaulted up from the pit in an impossible leap, and bisected Darth Maul in a single stroke before the Sith Lord could react. Qui-Gon lay dying in his apprentice's arms. With his final breaths, the Jedi Master made Obi-Wan promise to train Anakin. The boy was the chosen one, Qui-Gon insisted. He would bring balance to the Force, but he needed proper training. Promise me, Qui-Gon begged. Obi-Wan, tears streaming down his face, gave his word. The Jedi Council, shaken by the return of the Sith after a millennium of absence, reconvened. With Qui-Gon dead and a Sith threat emerged, they reconsidered their position. Master Yoda, though still troubled by the fear he sensed in Anakin, agreed to allow the boy's training. Obi-Wan Kenobi, newly elevated to the rank of Jedi Knight, would take Anakin Skywalker as his Padawan learner. At Qui-Gon's funeral, as his body burned on a ceremonial pyre, Anakin stood beside his new master. The boy was no longer a slave, but neither was he truly free. The chains of fear still bound him, invisible, but no less real. And in the shadows, in the highest levels of political power, a patient evil watched and waited. The Sith had not returned with just one apprentice. There was another, one far more dangerous, whose plans had only begun to unfold. The decade that followed transformed Anakin Skywalker from a boy into a young man. At 19, he stood tall and confident, his sandy hair grown longer, a small braid marking him as a Padawan learner. His boyish features had sharpened into striking handsomeness, but those blue eyes still carried shadows. depths of emotion he struggled to control. Training under Obi-Wan had been challenging for both master and student. Obi-Wan tried to follow Qui-Gon's unorthodox teaching methods while also adhering to the Jedi Code's traditional structures. He found himself caught between honoring his fallen master's vision and his own sense of how a Jedi should be trained. The result was a relationship marked by genuine affection, but also frequent friction. Anakin chafed under what he saw as Obi-Wan's overly cautious approach. The young Padawan's connection to the Force grew stronger every day, his power increasing at rates that alarmed some council members. He could do things other Padawans couldn't, sense things they couldn't sense, accomplish feats that should have been beyond him. This natural talent bred a certain arrogance, a belief that he was being hailed back rather than guided carefully. The galaxy itself had changed during these years. Political tensions within the Republic had escalated as thousands of systems threatened to leave the Union, forming what they called the Separatist movement. Led by a former Jedi named Count Dooku, these Separatists argued that the Republic had become too corrupt, too inefficient to govern effectively. They wanted independence, their own governing structure free from Coruscant's influence. Senator Palpatine had risen to become Supreme Chancellor, voted into office during the Naboo crisis 10 years earlier. He had promised to clean up corruption and restore order. But somehow, each promise led to more emergency powers, more centralization of authority. The Senate granted him extended terms to deal with the crisis, each extension bringing him closer to the kind of absolute power the Republic had been designed to prevent. In the shadows, Count Dooku worked to build a massive droid army for the Separatists. The former Jedi, now called Darth Tyrannus by his secret Sith master, orchestrated the creation of billions of battle droids. But there was a counter to this move, one equally clandestine. The Republic had secretly commissioned a clone army on the water world of Kamino. Millions of identical soldiers grown from the genetic template of a bounty hunter named Jango Fett. These political machinations formed the backdrop for a personal story that would change everything. Senator Padme Amidala, no longer a queen but now representing Naboo in the Galactic Senate, returned to Coruscant to vote on the Military Creation Act. Padme opposed the formation of a Republic army, believing that militarization would lead to war rather than prevent it. Someone wanted to ensure her vote never happened. An assassination attempt targeted Padme in her apartment. A droid carrying poisonous creatures nearly killed her while she slept. But Obi-Wan and Anakin, assigned as her protectors, arrived just in time. Obi-Wan pursued the assassin through Coruscant's endless cityscape in a chase that took them soaring through hover traffic and across rooftops. The pursuit ended in a nightclub in the lower levels, where Obi-Wan interrogated the assassin, a changeling named Zam Wesell. Before she could reveal who hired her, a toxic dart fired from the shadows killed her. The Council assigned Obi-Wan to investigate the assassination attempt's origins, while Anakin would escort Padme to her home planet of Naboo, keeping her safe and far from danger. The thought of spending time with Padme thrilled and terrified Anakin in equal measure. During his first meeting with her 10 years ago, as a 9-year-old boy with sand in his hair and hope in his eyes, he'd asked if she was an angel. She'd laughed gently at his innocence. Now, that boy had grown into a man who'd spent a decade thinking about her, dreaming about her, imagining a future the Jedi Code explicitly forbade. The Jedi prohibited attachment, seeing it as a path to the dark side. Love, possession, the fear of loss, these emotions clouded judgment and led to suffering. Jedi were meant to serve all beings equally, their compassion extending to everyone and no one in particular. Personal attachments created vulnerabilities, made Jedi act from emotion rather than wisdom. Anakin understood the reasoning, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. He'd already lost so much: his mother, his freedom as a child, his childhood itself. The idea of not being allowed to love seemed like losing everything that made life worth living. On Naboo, amid rolling green hills and crystal blue lakes, Anakin and Padme reconnected. She saw the boy she'd remembered transformed into a passionate young man, brilliant and intense, full of certainty and fire. They walked through gardens, rode across meadows, and talked for hours. Padme found herself drawn to him despite every logical reason to resist. She was a senator, a public figure, and he was a Jedi, sworn to an order that demanded his complete devotion. But Anakin's dreams had turned dark. Night after night, he woke from nightmares showing his mother in pain, suffering, calling out for him. The visions felt more than mere dreams. They carried the weight of the Force, the sensation of future events casting shadows backward through time. He told Padme he had to go to Tatooine, had to find his mother and ensure she was safe. And Padme, seeing his anguish and remembering her own family's love, agreed to go with him. The shadows of Tatooine and seeds of darkness. Tatooine had not changed in 10 years. The same twin suns blazed over the same endless deserts. The same desperate beings scratched out the same difficult lives. But everything had changed for the boy who returned as a man. When Anakin landed in Mos Espa, he discovered that Watto still operated his junk shop, though age and business losses had worn the Toydarian down. Watto informed Anakin that he'd sold Shmi years ago to a moisture farmer named Cliegg Lars, who had subsequently freed and married her. The Lars homestead existed on the edge of the Dune Sea, a modest moisture farm where hardy souls extracted precious water from the air itself. Cliegg Lars, an older man with kind eyes and weathered features, had lost his left leg in an accident and now used a repulsor chair for mobility. His son Owen, roughly Anakin's age, and Owen's girlfriend Beru greeted Anakin with cautious friendliness. But the news they brought crushed whatever hope Anakin harbored. Tusken Raiders, the nomadic people native to Tatooine, had kidnapped Shmi a month earlier while she collected mushrooms on the farm's edges. Cliegg had immediately formed a rescue party of moisture farmers, 30 men riding out into the desert. The Tuskens had ambushed them savagely. 26 men died, and Cliegg lost his leg escaping. They never found Shmi. Anakin's face went blank, that terrible calm that preceded volcanic emotion. He excused himself, taking one of the farm's speeders, and raced into the desert as the sun set. Padme wanted to follow, but Cliegg held her back. This was something Anakin had to face alone. In the darkness, guided by the Force, or perhaps by something darker still, Anakin found the Tusken camp. He infiltrated their settlement like a ghost, moving between their hide tents, sensing rather than seeing his path. In a tent on the camp's edge, he found her. Shmi hung suspended from the tent's frame, bound by leather straps, her body marked by days of torture and exposure. When Anakin cut her down, her eyes fluttered open. Recognition dawned in her fading gaze. "Ani, is it you?" she whispered, her voice broken. She touched his face with trembling hands, told him she was complete because she got to see him one final time, and then she died in his arms. something snapped inside Anakin Skywalker in that moment. Every lesson, every teaching about controlling emotions, about letting go of attachment, about accepting death as part of life, all of it shattered. The Force, which he'd always experienced as a gentle current guiding his instincts, became a raging torrent of dark power. His grief and rage transformed into fuel, and the dark side offered itself freely, without reservation, without judgment. He ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade casting harsh light across the tent's interior. Then he stepped outside, and he began to kill. Not just the warriors who had tortured his mother, but everyone. Women who had looked the other way. Children who would grow into raiders. Even the banthas the Tuscans rode. Nothing was spared his fury. The sand drank blood that night, soaking in the lives of an entire tribe, while Anakin Skywalker stood at the massacre's center, tears streaming down his face, lightsaber humming with deadly purpose. When he finally returned to the Lars homestead, his eyes were hollow, ancient. He crossed a line, and some part of him knew he could never uncross it. Padme found him in the garage where he'd once built C-3PO, and he confessed everything to her. He told her about the Tuscans, about the rage that had consumed him, about how he'd killed them all. He broke down sobbing, this powerful young Jedi reduced to a frightened boy who'd lost his mother and lost himself in the same terrible night. Padme should have recoiled in horror. What Anakin described was genocide, the slaughter of an entire community in cold rage. But she saw his anguish, his genuine remorse mixed with righteous fury, and she held him. She comforted him rather than condemning him. In that moment, Padme made a choice that would echo through the decades, choosing love over wisdom, heart over head. She saw the boy from Tatooine rather than the darkness he'd just embraced. A transmission from Obi-Wan interrupted their grief. He'd tracked the assassination plot's threads to Geonosis, a harsh desert world inhabited by insectoid beings called Geonosians. There, he'd discovered something terrifying: massive droid foundries producing armies of battle droids, and a meeting of separatist leaders planning for war. Count Dooku himself led this gathering, confirming the former Jedi's involvement in the conspiracy. Obi-Wan managed to transmit this intelligence before being captured, his message ending with blaster fire and a sudden silence. Anakin and Padme knew they should report this to the Jedi Council and await instructions. But Obi-Wan was Anakin's master, the closest thing to family he had left besides his mother's grave, still fresh on Tatooine's scorching sands. He couldn't let Obi-Wan face danger alone, and Padme, senator and leader, understood that they had to warn the Republic. War was coming whether anyone wanted it or not. They traveled to Geonosis, landing in the planet's rocky wastelands and infiltrating the droid foundries. But Count Dooku had anticipated their arrival. Jango Fett, the bounty hunter whose genetic template had created the Republic's clone army, pursued them through the foundries while conveyor belts carried them toward stamping machines and molten metal. They barely escaped with their lives, only to be captured by Geonosian soldiers and brought before Count Dooku himself. The fallen Jedi stood in a dark chamber, his white hair and beard giving him the appearance of a wise elder, but his eyes held only cold calculation. He spoke to them of the Republic's corruption, of how the Senate had become a tool for corporations and special interests. He claimed the Separatists sought only freedom from a bloated, dying system. He even told them something extraordinary. The Republic itself was now under the control of a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious. The Dark Lord of the Sith is controlling the Senate, Dooku revealed. Hundreds of senators are now under the influence of a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious. He offered Padme and Anakin a chance to join the Separatists to help them fight this hidden evil, but neither believed him. How could they trust a man who commanded armies of droids who had clearly fallen to the dark side himself? Dooku's words carried too much truth to be complete lies, but seemed too convenient to be completely true. Their execution was ordered for the next day in Geonosis's massive execution arena. They would die as entertainment for the Separatist leadership, killed by arena beasts before crowds of droids and Geonosians. This was meant to be a spectacle, a demonstration of Separatist power and Republic weakness. But the Jedi had not been idle. Master Mace Windu, leading a team of 200 Jedi Knights, had arrived in secret. As Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan faced down arena beasts, an Acklay, a Reek, and a Nexu, the Jedi revealed themselves, igniting their lightsabers in unison around the arena's perimeter. The Clone Wars, the galaxy-spanning conflict that would define an entire generation, had begun. The Clone Wars and transformation of a hero. The battle on Geonosis was chaos incarnate. 200 Jedi, the largest force the Order had assembled in centuries, faced tens of thousands of battle droids in the arena's confined space. Blue, green, and purple lightsaber blades carved through droid chassis, while blaster fire filled the air with deadly energy bolts. Master Mace Windu confronted Jango Fett personally, their duel ending with the bounty hunter's death, leaving his young son Boba to watch from the stands, planting seeds of vengeance that would grow in years to come. Anakin fought with breathtaking skill, his lightsaber a blur of motion, but the droids' numbers seemed endless. The Jedi formed a defensive circle as more and more of their number fell, each death diminishing the light in the galaxy. Just when all seemed lost, Master Yoda arrived with reinforcements. The Grand Army of the Republic, millions of clone troopers bred for warfare, arriving in massive transport ships that descended from the sky like divine intervention. The Republic's clone troopers wore white armor, emblazoned with red markings, their faces hidden behind helmets, moving with military precision that put the battle droids' crude tactics to shame. They provided covering fire as gunships evacuated the surviving Jedi from the arena. The battle expanded beyond the arena's walls as Separatist forces and Republic clones clashed across Geonosis's rocky terrain. During the evacuation, Anakin and Obi-Wan spotted Count Dooku attempting to escape. Against Mace Windu's orders, they pursued him to a hangar where Dooku's ship waited. The confrontation that followed demonstrated just how far Anakin still had to progress in his training and how dangerous the dark side made even an elderly former Jedi. Dooku wielded his curved hilt lightsaber with elegant precision, a duelist's weapon in the hands of a master swordsman. He first incapacitated Obi-Wan with Force lightning, dark side energy crackling from his fingertips to send the Jedi Master crashing into a wall. Anakin engaged Dooku alone, dual-wielding lightsabers in a fury of strikes that seemed driven more by anger than technique. For a moment, it appeared the young Padawan's raw power might overcome Dooku's refined skill. Then, Dooku's blade found its mark. In a single flowing motion, the Count severed Anakin's right arm at the forearm, his lightsaber cutting through flesh and bone as easily as air. Anakin collapsed, screaming in agony, his severed limb lying meters away, fingers still gripping the lightsaber's hilt. Blood, pain, and the terrible realization of his inadequacy flooded through him as consciousness flickered. Master Yoda arrived just before Dooku could deliver killing blows. The ancient Jedi Master, standing barely 2 feet tall and walking with a cane, seemed impossibly frail, but when he raised his hand and caught Dooku's Force lightning in his palm, absorbing and dispersing the dark energy harmlessly, the Count's confidence faltered. When Yoda's lightsaber ignited, blazing green in the darkness, and the diminutive master began spinning and leaping with incredible speed and agility, Dooku realized he faced a power beyond his ability to overcome. Their duel was brief but spectacular, 2 masters of the Force exchanging blows at speeds that made them blurs to normal perception. But Dooku knew he couldn't win. He used the Force to topple a massive pillar toward the fallen Anakin and Obi-Wan, forcing Yoda to choose between pressing his advantage or saving his fellow Jedi. Yoda, of course, chose mercy, catching and holding the pillar with the Force while Dooku escaped into hyperspace. Later, aboard a Separatist command ship, Dooku met with a holographic projection. The figure wore a dark hood, its features obscured by shadows, but its authority was absolute. Darth Sidious, the hidden Sith Lord, praised his apprentice's work. The Clone Wars had begun exactly as planned. The Republic and Separatists would bleed each other across 1,000 worlds, creating chaos and fear, the perfect conditions for Sidious's ultimate plan to unfold. The war that followed consumed the galaxy for 3 years. From the core worlds to the outer rim, clone troopers and battle droids fought for control of systems, resources, and strategic hyperspace routes. The Jedi, once peacekeepers and diplomats, became generals leading armies into battle. It was a role that contradicted everything the Order stood for, but they saw no choice. If they didn't lead the clone army, who would? If they stepped back and let darkness advance unopposed, how were they serving the light? Anakin Skywalker emerged as one of the war's greatest heroes. After months of rehabilitation and the fitting of a cybernetic arm to replace the limb Dooku had severed, he returned to combat with renewed determination. His mechanical hand, covered in a black glove to hide its artificial nature, served as a constant reminder of his failure on Geonosis and his vow never to be weak again. He and Obi-Wan, now officially partners rather than master and apprentice, led countless campaigns. They saved Palpatine from kidnapping, liberated occupied worlds, and earned reputations as the Republic's finest warriors. Anakin's tactical brilliance combined with his raw Force power made him nearly unstoppable in combat. He earned the nickname the Hero with No Fear, leading charges that more cautious commanders would have deemed suicidal, yet somehow surviving and emerging victorious time and again. The Jedi Council, recognizing his abilities and hoping to teach him responsibility, assigned Anakin a Padawan learner, a young Togruta girl named Ahsoka Tano. 14 years old when they met, Ahsoka possessed blue and white head tails, blue eyes, full of determination, and an attitude that immediately clashed with her new masters. Anakin initially resented this assignment, seeing a student as an unwanted burden that would slow him down. But Ahsoka proved herself quickly. She possessed her own brand of brilliance and courage, challenging Anakin's assumptions while learning from his unorthodox methods. Over time, their relationship evolved into something deeper than mere master and student. They became partners, siblings in all but blood, watching each other's backs through countless battles. Ahsoka called him Sky Guy, while he called her Snips, affectionate nicknames that belied the genuine love they developed. Through Ahsoka, Anakin learned to let go in small ways. He couldn't control everything about her development, couldn't protect her from every danger, couldn't prevent her from making her own choices and mistakes. These lessons, meant to help him overcome his fear of loss, taught him how to care without completely possessing. Master Yoda hoped this experience would prepare Anakin for the inevitable moment when he would have to release Ahsoka fully, to accept her growing up and moving beyond his instruction. The war revealed the best and worst in everyone. Anakin's compassion led him to spare enemies who might have shown mercy, to risk himself protecting clones under his command, to forge deep friendships with soldiers like Captain Rex, who served under him. But his anger grew too, fueled by the war's brutality and the impossible choices it demanded. He executed captured enemies in rage, used torture when he believed the ends justified the means, pushed himself and others past reasonable limits in pursuit of victory. Through it all, Anakin's secret relationship with Padme deepened. They married in a secret ceremony on Naboo shortly after the war's outbreak, with only C-3PO and R2-D2 as witnesses. Their love was genuine and passionate, but also forbidden, and therefore conducted in shadows and stolen moments. Whenever Anakin returned to Coruscant between campaigns, he would secretly visit Padme's apartment. They would spend precious hours together, sometimes just sitting in silence, savoring each other's presence after weeks or months apart. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine took particular interest in Anakin's development. He became a friend and mentor figure, inviting the young Jedi to attend the opera, to discuss philosophy and politics, to share confidences he claimed he could share with no one else. Palpatine praised Anakin's achievements while subtly undermining the Jedi Council, planting seeds of doubt about whether the Jedi truly understood or appreciated him. He spoke of power without the Jedi's limitations, of security through strength, of doing whatever necessary to protect those you love. To Anakin, Palpatine represented validation and respect, things he felt the Council denied him. They saw his power, but also his flaws, recognized his achievements, but remained wary of his darkness. Palpatine, by contrast, seemed to see only Anakin's potential, believed in him completely, and never judged him for his anger or passion. This relationship, fostered over years of carefully crafted interactions, slowly isolated Anakin from the Jedi Order, even as he served as one of their greatest champions. And the war ground on, each victory bringing only more battles, each world liberated requiring dozens more to be freed. The galaxy bled while politicians argued and generals calculated acceptable losses. The Clone Wars transformed the Republic into something else, something harder and darker, where civil liberties were suspended for security, where military law superseded civilian government, where fear of the separatist threat justified ever-increasing emergency powers. All according to the plan of a patient, ancient evil who moved pieces across a galactic game board, orchestrating both sides of the conflict, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap and transform the Republic into something that would make the Separatists look like heroes by comparison. The Sith had waited 1,000 years for their revenge. A few more months wouldn't matter. If you're enjoying this journey through the Skywalker Saga, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's much more of this galactic epic to explore, and your support helps us create more content like this. Let's continue with the tragedy that followed as we move into the saga's darkest chapter. 3 years into the Clone Wars, the galaxy stood balanced on a knife's edge. Billions had died, entire civilizations had been devastated, and the Republic had transformed from a beacon of democracy into something resembling a military dictatorship, all in the name of security and victory. The Jedi, once counselors and peacekeepers, had become generals and warriors, their lightsabers stained with the blood of countless battles. They didn't realize how perfectly they'd walked into the Sith's trap, how each compromise of their principles brought them closer to the Order's destruction. The war entered its final phase when General Grievous, a cyborg monstrosity commanding the separatist droid armies, kidnapped Supreme Chancellor Palpatine from Coruscant itself. Grievous was a terrifying figure. His organic brain and eyes housed in a droid body equipped with 4 arms that could split apart, each wielding a lightsaber taken from dead Jedi. He led the assault personally, his flagship descending through Coruscant's orbital defense grid in a brazen attack that brought the war to the Republic's capital. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi led the rescue mission. They infiltrated Grievous's flagship, the Invisible Hand, cutting through battle droids and navigating exploding corridors as a massive space battle raged around them. They found Palpatine bound to a chair in the general's quarters, seemingly helpless but watching everything with those patient, calculating eyes. And standing guard over the Chancellor was Count Dooku himself, waiting for the Jedi to arrive. The duel between Anakin and Dooku was nothing like their encounter on Geonosis 3 years earlier. Then, Anakin had been overconfident and underprepared, paying for his arrogance with his arm. Now, after years of war and training, after countless battles and near-death experiences, he had grown immensely powerful. Dooku's elegant technique, his precision and experience, could no longer overcome Anakin's raw strength and burning intensity. Their lightsabers clashed with explosive force, blue and red blades weaving deadly patterns. Obi-Wan tried to assist, but Dooku used the Force to choke him unconscious, leaving Anakin to face the Sith Lord alone. This time, that's exactly what Anakin wanted. His anger, channeled and focused, gave him access to dark side power that made him faster, stronger, more relentless than Dooku anticipated. Within minutes, Anakin had disarmed the Count, literally, his lightsaber severing both of Dooku's hands at the wrists. The Count fell to his knees, lightsaber blades crossed against his throat, defeat written across his aristocratic features. He looked not at Anakin, but past him, toward Palpatine, confusion dawning in his eyes. "My lord, help me," he pleaded. Palpatine's response should have shocked everyone in the room, but no one was truly listening to what it revealed. "Kill him," Palpatine commanded, his voice carrying an authority that seemed more than merely political. "Kill him now." When Anakin hesitated, citing the Jedi Code's prohibition against executing helpless prisoners, Palpatine's voice took on a harder edge. "Do it." This was not a suggestion from a grateful hostage. This was an order from a master to a servant. Anakin's lightsabers crossed, and Count Dooku's head fell from his shoulders. In that moment, Anakin had executed an unarmed prisoner at Palpatine's command, violating everything the Jedi stood for. Immediately, guilt consumed him. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice hollow with horror at his own actions. "It's not the Jedi way." Palpatine dismissed his concerns with practiced ease. "It is only natural. He cut off your arm, and you wanted revenge. It wasn't the first time you've killed someone, Anakin, and it won't be the last." Those words carried terrible truth. Anakin had killed before, had massacred the Tusken Raiders, had executed prisoners during the war. Each time, he told himself circumstances justified the action, that survival demanded such choices. But he was accumulating darkness like stones in his pockets, each transgression weighing him down further, pulling him toward an abyss he couldn't quite see. They escaped Grievous's flagship as it broke apart around them, piloting half a ship through Coruscant's atmosphere in a landing that defied both physics and sanity. Anakin brought them down in a crash that should have killed everyone aboard, but somehow resulted in nothing worse than smoke and minor injuries. The crowds that greeted their return celebrated Anakin as a hero, the man who'd saved the Chancellor and dealt a major blow to the Separatists. But Anakin felt hollow, the victory tainted by Dooku's execution. Padme waited for him in her apartment, and when they embraced, she revealed news that should have brought only joy. She was pregnant. Anakin's face lit with wonder and fear in equal measure. A child, his child, a family of his own after losing everything as a boy. But the joy lasted only until sleep, when the dreams began. Night after night, Anakin suffered visions of Padme dying in childbirth, her screams echoing through his mind, her life draining away while he stood helpless to save her. These weren't ordinary nightmares. They carried the weight of Force visions, prophecies written in pain and loss. He'd experienced such dreams before about his mother, and they had come true with horrible accuracy. The thought of losing Padme, of watching her die while their child was born, drove him to the edge of madness. Desperate for guidance, Anakin turned to Master Yoda. Without revealing Padme's identity, he described someone close to him whom he feared losing. Yoda's advice, while wise, cut to the quick of Anakin's deepest fear. Death is a natural part of life, the ancient master counseled. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them, do not. Miss them, do not. Attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. When Anakin pressed further, Yoda delivered the advice that would seal the galaxy's fate. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Let go. The same advice they'd always given him, the same impossible demand. Let go of his mother, let go of Padme, let go of their unborn child. Accept loss with serenity and move on. To Anakin, this sounded like asking him to stop being human, to become a stone-cold automaton who cared for nothing and no one deeply enough to fight against death itself. The Jedi way suddenly seemed less like enlightenment and more like slow emotional death. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine offered different counsel at the opera. During a performance of a Naboo tragedy, Palpatine shared a story. "Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?" he asked, his voice taking on a storyteller's rhythm. Anakin shook his head, and Palpatine continued, "I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. It's a Sith legend." He spoke of an ancient Sith Lord who had mastered the Force to such an extent that he could influence the midi-chlorians to create life itself, to prevent those he cared about from dying. He became so powerful, the only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which eventually, of course, he did. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. Ironic, he could save others from death, but not himself. The story gripped Anakin with terrible intensity. The possibility that someone, anyone, had learned to prevent death from claiming loved ones made his heart race. "Is it possible to learn this power?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but hearing the desperation in his own voice. Palpatine's response was carefully vague. "Not from a Jedi." The Chancellor had been masterfully cultivating Anakin's frustration with the Jedi Council. He'd had Anakin appointed to the Council as his personal representative, an unprecedented move that put the young Jedi in an impossible position. The Council, recognizing this as Palpatine's attempt to bypass their independence, granted Anakin a seat, but denied him the rank of Master. The humiliation burned. Anakin had done everything asked of him, had saved countless lives, had proven himself time and again, yet they still held him at arm's length, still treated him like the dangerous child they'd first met 20 years ago. What Anakin didn't know was that the Council had asked him to spy on Palpatine, to report the Chancellor's dealings back to them. They suspected Palpatine of manipulating the war for personal gain, of refusing to surrender emergency powers even as victory drew near. Asking Anakin to betray Palpatine's confidence put him in an untenable position, caught between the Jedi Council and the father figure who'd always believed in him. While Anakin struggled with impossible choices, Obi-Wan traveled to Utapau to confront General Grievous. The cyborg general commanded the remaining Separatist forces from a sinkhole city on the planet's surface. Their confrontation was brutal and desperate. Grievous's 4 spinning lightsabers against Obi-Wan's single blade. The Jedi Master, using unorthodox tactics that took advantage of the general's mechanical nature. In the end, Obi-Wan killed Grievous with a blaster, the very weapon Jedi typically disdained, shooting repeatedly into the cyborg's exposed organic parts until his body ignited and exploded. With Grievous dead, the war seemed nearly over, but Palpatine had no intention of letting peace interrupt his plans. In his office in the Senate building, he finally revealed himself to Anakin. Under the pretense of sharing more knowledge about the dark side's power to prevent death, he openly confirmed what Count Dooku had once claimed. He was Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, the mastermind behind both sides of the Clone Wars. Anakin's lightsaber was ignited in seconds, the blue blade humming mere inches from Palpatine's throat. But the Chancellor showed no fear. He spoke calmly, reasonably, explaining that the Jedi and Sith differed only in perspective, that good and evil were points of view, that true power lay in understanding all aspects of the Force rather than limiting oneself to the light side's restrictions. He also reminded Anakin of their friendship, of years spent building mutual trust and respect, and he held out the ultimate temptation, the power to save Padme. "If you kill me," Palpatine said softly, "you will lose the only chance you have of saving Padme." Anakin's lightsaber wavered. His duty as a Jedi demanded he execute this Sith Lord immediately. But his love for Padme, his terror of losing her, his desperate need to prevent the visions from coming true, all of it paralyzed him. He lowered his blade. "You're under arrest," he said weakly, and left to inform the Jedi Council of what he'd learned. Master Mace Windu took 3 other council members, Kit Fisto, Aegon Kohler, and Saesee Tiin, to arrest Palpatine. Anakin was ordered to remain at the temple, excluded from the confrontation. But as he paced the council chambers, the magnitude of what was about to happen crashed over him. If the Jedi killed Palpatine, any knowledge the Sith Lord possessed about saving Padme would die with him. Anakin's choice crystallized with terrible clarity: betray the Jedi Order or watch Padme die. He raced to Palpatine's office, arriving just as Mace Windu stood over the Chancellor with his lightsaber raised for the killing blow. The other 3 Jedi Masters lay dead, cut down by Palpatine's hidden power and lightning-fast skill. Palpatine, appearing weak and defeated, pleaded for mercy, but Mace was immovable. The Chancellor was too dangerous to be kept alive. "I need him," Anakin screamed, and in that moment, in that terrible moment of decision, he chose fear over duty. When Mace raised his blade to execute Palpatine, Anakin ignited his own lightsaber and severed Mace's right hand at the wrist. The purple blade fell, and Palpatine, suddenly no longer helpless, unleashed torrents of Force lightning that launched Mace Windu through the window. The Jedi Master plummeted screaming into Coruscant's depths, his body lost among millions of other falling things. Anakin dropped to his knees, the horror of what he'd just done crashing over him. He'd betrayed and murdered Mace Windu, a legendary Jedi Master and member of the Council. There was no coming back from this, no forgiveness possible, no redemption available. "What have I done?" he whispered. Palpatine stood over him, his face no longer that of a kindly grandfather, but twisted into a mask of triumph and cruelty. "You're fulfilling your destiny, Anakin. Become my apprentice. Learn to use the dark side of the Force." And Anakin, with nowhere else to turn, with all bridges burned behind him, knelt before Darth Sidious. "I will do whatever you ask," he pledged. "Just help me save Padme's life. I can't live without her." "To cheat death is a power only one has achieved," Sidious said, his words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "But if we work together, I know we can discover the secret." He bestowed a new name upon his apprentice, the name that would haunt the galaxy for decades to come. "Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader." The newly christened Darth Vader received his first orders with mechanical compliance. He was to lead the 501st Legion of clone troopers to the Jedi Temple and kill everyone inside. Every Jedi, every Padawan, every youngling learning to hold a training saber. None were to be spared. The Jedi Order would be wiped from the galaxy in a single night. While Vader marched on the temple, Palpatine enacted the second phase of his plan. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds where clone troopers fought beside Jedi generals, Palpatine transmitted a coded order: execute Order 66. The clones, bred with inhibitor chips that compelled obedience to this specific command, turned on the Jedi without hesitation. Commanders who'd fought beside Jedi for years shot them in the back without question or remorse. On Utapau, as Obi-Wan Kenobi rode a giant lizard up from the Sinkhole City, his own troops fired on him, their blasters tearing through beast and Jedi alike. Obi-Wan survived only by plunging into a lake far below, faking his death while his former soldiers confirmed his demise. On Kashyyyk, Master Yoda felt the deaths of thousands of Jedi through the Force, their lights extinguishing like stars snuffed out by a great darkness. He decapitated the clone troopers attempting to kill him and escaped into the forests with Wookiee allies. At the Jedi Temple, younglings huddled in a council chamber, lightsabers ignited in trembling hands, when Anakin Skywalker, no, Darth Vader, entered with the 501st behind him. One brave child, perhaps 6 years old, looked up at this legendary Jedi and asked, "Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?" Vader's response was to ignite his lightsaber. The blue blade activated with its familiar snap hiss, but the light it cast now illuminated only death. The massacre lasted through the night. The temple burned, great columns of smoke rising from the structure that had stood for millennia. The Jedi Order, 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom and philosophy and hope, died in hours. A few scattered survivors might escape into the Outer Rim, but as an institution, as a force for light in the galaxy, the Jedi ceased to exist on that terrible night. Palpatine addressed the Senate the following morning, standing before thousands of assembled beings from across the Republic. He spoke of how the Jedi had attempted to overthrow the government, how they'd betrayed the Republic they'd sworn to protect, how only his loyal troops had prevented their coup from succeeding. To thunderous applause, he announced the formation of the first galactic empire, with himself as emperor. In order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society. Senator Padme Amidala watched in horror, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed democracy die to the sound of cheering. "So this is how liberty dies," she whispered to Bail Organa beside her. With thunderous applause, Vader traveled to Mustafar, a volcanic world where the Separatist Council had gathered in a fortified facility. His master had given him one final task: eliminate the Separatist leadership, tying up this last loose end. The battle droid armies needed to be deactivated, and that required the Council's command codes. Vader entered their conference room like death incarnate. "The war is over," he announced, his voice hollow and cold. "Lord Sidious promised us peace," their leader protested. "We only want—" Vader's lightsaber activated, and the slaughter began anew. These weren't warriors or soldiers. They were bureaucrats, corporate leaders, cowards who'd financed war from comfortable boardrooms while others died. Vader cut them down without mercy or hesitation, his blade moving through business attire and flesh with equal ease. When he emerged from the facility, the lava rivers of Mustafar burning around him, the Clone Wars had officially ended. The Separatist droid armies shut down across the galaxy as their control ships received the deactivation signal. Obi-Wan and Yoda regrouped on Bail Organa's ship and returned to Coruscant to investigate the temple's ruins. They found the security recordings, and what they showed broke Obi-Wan's heart. His brother, his friend, the boy he'd raised into a man, murdering younglings and kneeling before the Emperor. "I can't watch anymore," Obi-Wan said, his voice cracking. But Yoda insisted. If Vader lived, he had to be stopped. Padme refused to believe what the recording showed, convinced there was some explanation, some way Anakin could still be the hero she loved. When Obi-Wan came to her, begging for information about Anakin's whereabouts, she denied knowing anything. But her face betrayed her, and when she left for Mustafar aboard her ship, Obi-Wan stowed away. Padme would lead him directly to Vader, even as she hoped to save the husband she still believed in. On Mustafar's landing platform, Padme emerged from her ship to find Anakin waiting. His eyes had changed, the once bright blue now touched with yellow, the corruption of the dark side beginning to manifest physically. He spoke to her of his power, of how the Emperor would make him strong enough that nothing could threaten them, how they could rule the galaxy together. "Love won't save you, Padme," he said, his voice carrying an edge of madness. "Only my new powers can do that." "Anakin, all I want is your love," she pleaded, trying to reach the man she'd married. "Love can't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can." When Obi-Wan emerged from her ship, Anakin's paranoia exploded. He believed she'd brought Obi-Wan to kill him, that she'd betrayed him, that everyone had always doubted him, and now they were conspiring against him. Dark side energy crackled from his fingers as he used the Force to choke Padme, lifting her off the ground while she gasped for air. She collapsed unconscious as Obi-Wan shouted for Anakin to stop. "You turned her against me!" Vader screamed at his former master. "You have done that yourself." Obi-Wan responded, his voice filled with grief and barely controlled rage. They faced each other across the landing platform. Two men who'd been through countless battles together, who'd saved each other's lives more times than either could count, now forced to fight to the death by choices that seemed inevitable and senseless in equal measure. The duel that followed across Mustafar's hellish landscape was a masterpiece of hatred and grief. They knew each other too well, every fighting style, every preferred technique, every possible move anticipated before it happened. Their lightsabers clashed with explosive force as they fought through the mining facility and out onto structures suspended above lava rivers. They balanced on pipes and platforms, dodged geysers of molten rock, and traded blows that would have killed lesser fighters instantly. "I have failed you, Anakin," Obi-Wan said as their blades locked. "I have failed you." Vader's response was pure venom. "I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over." "Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil," Obi-Wan protested. "From my point of view, the Jedi are evil." The philosophical divide that separated them could no longer be bridged with words. Only one of them would leave Mustafar alive. They leaped onto separate platforms floating down the lava river, continuing their duel on this apocalyptic stage. Vader attacked with the strength and speed the dark side provided, but Obi-Wan fought with precision and patience, conserving energy, waiting for an opening. When Vader's platform drifted close to the shore, he saw his chance. He leapt for the bank, trying to end the fight with one dramatic move. Obi-Wan seized the high ground, planting his feet firmly on the shore above. "It's over, Anakin," he called down. "I have the high ground." Vader, consumed by arrogance and dark side confidence, believed he could overcome this disadvantage through sheer power. "You underestimate my power," he shouted and launched himself upward in a Force-enhanced leap. Obi-Wan's lightsaber moved in a single, perfect arc. Vader's legs separated from his body at the thighs, and his remaining arm fell in a different direction. The newly made Sith Lord collapsed on the volcanic shore, unable even to roll away from the advancing lava. Obi-Wan stood over him, tears streaming down his face as his brother, his friend, his greatest failure, caught fire. "You were the chosen one," he screamed at the burning figure. "It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness." Vader's remaining hand clawed at the black sand, his body engulfed in flames as he screamed in agony. Obi-Wan retrieved Vader's lightsaber from where it had fallen and walked away, unable to watch any longer. He left Anakin Skywalker to burn, convinced his former Padawan would be dead within minutes. But Emperor Palpatine, sensing his apprentice's agony through their connection in the Force, arrived in time to save what remained. Medical droids worked frantically to stabilize Vader's ruined body. Where his legs had been, cybernetic replacements were attached. His remaining organic arm received enhancement implants. His lungs, seared by volcanic heat, could no longer function on their own. They sealed him in a suit of black armor with a respiratory system that would keep him alive through constant mechanical breathing. When the transformation was complete, when they activated the armor systems and Vader took his first breath with those mechanical lungs, the sound was like death itself inhaling. The first thing Vader saw through his helmet's lenses was Palpatine's face, twisted in mock concern. "Lord Vader," the Emperor said softly, "can you hear me?" Vader, his voice now synthesized through the suit's speakers, responded with the only question that mattered. "Where is Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right?" Palpatine's answer destroyed whatever remained of Anakin Skywalker's humanity. "It seems in your anger you killed her." The lie was perfect, unverifiable, and absolutely devastating. Vader screamed, a sound of pure anguish that the helmet systems twisted into something inhuman. He reached out with the Force, and the medical bay around him crumpled like paper, equipment shattering, droids crushed, the walls themselves bending inward. Everything he'd done, every atrocity committed, every principle betrayed, all of it to save Padme. And he'd killed her himself, his anger and paranoia and dark side corruption murdering the very person he'd fallen trying to protect. The tragedy of Darth Vader was complete. The hero with no fear had become a creature of pure terror, a dark enforcer, trapped forever in a prison of his own making, serving the master who'd orchestrated his fall with patience and terrible certainty. But Palpatine had lied. Padme hadn't died on Mustafar, though the damage to her body and spirit was immense. Obi-Wan had taken her to Polis Massa, a remote medical facility where she gave birth to twins, Luke and Leia. "Is she all right?" Obi-Wan asked the medical droid as Padme's screams echoed through the facility. "Medically, she's completely healthy," the droid responded with programmed honesty. "For reasons we cannot explain, we are losing her." Padme was dying from something no technology could heal, a broken heart, the loss of will to continue living. With her final breaths, Padme held her babies, looking at each precious face in turn. "Luke," she whispered, naming her son. "Leia," naming her daughter. And then, with incredible effort, she spoke her final words. "There's still good in him, I know there is." She died believing the man she loved still existed somewhere inside Darth Vader's armor, that the darkness could still be overcome. Her body was returned to Naboo for a public funeral, her pregnant appearance maintained through careful preparation so no one would know about the children. As far as the Empire knew, Padme's child had died with her. Master Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi met to discuss the twins' future. They couldn't remain together. If the Emperor discovered Vader's children survived, he would hunt them to the ends of the galaxy. They decided to separate the siblings, hiding them in different locations where they might grow up in safety, ignorant of their heritage and destiny. Perhaps when they matured, when the time was right, they could be trained as Jedi and face the darkness their father had become. Bail Organa, senator of Alderaan and secret supporter of the emerging rebellion, took baby Leia to raise as his daughter, a princess of the royal house. Luke, meanwhile, would return to Tatooine, to Vader's homeworld, the last place in the galaxy the Dark Lord would want to revisit. Obi-Wan delivered the baby to Owen Lars, Anakin's stepbrother, and his wife Beru. The couple, living in the very moisture farm where Anakin's mother had died, agreed to raise the boy. They would tell him his father died heroically in the Clone Wars, a Jedi Knight named Anakin Skywalker. They would keep him safe, give him a normal life, far from the attention of the Empire. Obi-Wan settled into the deserts near the Lars homestead, becoming a hermit who the locals called Old Ben. He would watch over Luke from a distance, ensuring the boy's safety, waiting for the day when destiny called once more. Master Yoda exiled himself to Dagobah, a remote swamp planet strong with the Force, where he could continue to commune with the spirits of fallen Jedi and prepare for whatever future might yet come. The galaxy transformed. Democracy died, replaced by imperial rule. Stormtroopers patrolled streets where citizens once walked freely. Dissenters disappeared into prisons or worse. Species deemed inferior were enslaved. The Jedi became legends, then myths, their history rewritten by imperial propaganda. And at the center of it all stood Darth Vader, the Emperor's fist, his black armor making him instantly recognizable and universally feared. Where Vader walked, death followed. The hero with no fear had become the galaxy's most terrifying monster. The dark times had begun. A new hope emerges. 19 years passed. An entire generation grew up knowing only imperial rule, the era of the Republic and Jedi becoming distant history that most people doubted had ever really existed. The Empire consolidated its power through fear, building massive star destroyers that could reduce planets to ash, training stormtroopers in the millions, erasing culture and freedom wherever it spread. But rebellion stirred. Secret cells formed, scattered across the galaxy, united by a desperate hope that tyranny could be resisted. Spies infiltrated imperial facilities, saboteurs destroyed weapon shipments, and somewhere in the hidden leadership of this fragmented resistance, a plan took shape to strike at the Empire's heart. The Death Star, the Empire's ultimate weapon, hung in orbit above worlds like a mechanical moon. Larger than any city, this battle station possessed a super laser capable of destroying an entire planet. It represented the Empire's philosophy distilled to its purest form. Total power, absolute control, with planetary annihilation as the price of defiance. The Emperor planned to dissolve the Senate entirely, his regional governors maintaining control through fear of this battle station. Princess Leia Organa, now a young woman serving Alderaan as senator and secretly one of the rebellion's leaders, had obtained technical readouts of the Death Star. Rebel spies had died bringing this information to the Alliance, and Leia carried it personally, hoping to reach Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine. The old Jedi could deliver it to her adoptive father on Alderaan, and perhaps together they could find a weakness to exploit. But Darth Vader's Star Destroyer intercepted her ship above Tatooine. Stormtroopers swarmed aboard, killing rebel soldiers in the narrow corridors. Leia, knowing capture was imminent, fed the Death Star plans into her astromech droid R2-D2's memory banks, instructing the droid to find Obi-Wan Kenobi. R2-D2 and C-3PO, the protocol droid Anakin had built as a child, escaped in a pod, landing in Tatooine's desert. On the Lars Moisture Farm, a young man named Luke Skywalker toiled in the afternoon heat. At 19, he'd grown tall and strong, his sandy hair sun-bleached, his blue eyes, his father's eyes, though he didn't know it, holding dreams of something more than moisture farming. He spoke wistfully of the Academy, of flying for the Empire, of seeing the galaxy beyond Tatooine's twin suns. Uncle Owen kept promising next season, always finding reasons Luke was needed on the farm. When Owen purchased 2 droids from Jawa traders, Luke's life began to shift toward destiny. R2-D2, carrying Leia's message, escaped that first night, beeping about needing to find someone named Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke and C-3PO tracked him across the dune sea the following morning, only to be ambushed by Tusken raiders. A hooded figure intervened, frightened the raiders away with a strange, warbling cry. When the figure lowered his hood, Luke saw an old man with a full white beard and eyes that seemed to hold ancient sadness and wisdom. "Ben Kenobi," Luke said, "I'm glad you're here." Obi-Wan smiled gently. "The Jedi's name was Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's what you said. Is he a relative of yours?" "Obi-Wan Kenobi?" the old man repeated thoughtfully. "Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. A long time." He led Luke and the droids to his home, a modest dwelling carved into the rock, filled with remnants of a different era. There, R2-D2 projected Leia's holographic message. The beautiful young woman in white pleaded with Obi-Wan Kenobi to help her, revealing that he'd served her father in the Clone Wars, and that she needed him to deliver the Death Star plans to Alderaan. "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi," the hologram said. "You're my only hope." Luke stared at the projection, captivated by both the message's urgency and the messenger's beauty. "Who is she?" he asked. "She's beautiful." Obi-Wan explained that Princess Leia Organa needed help, and that he needed to take the droids to Alderaan. He invited Luke to come with him, to leave Tatooine behind and learn the ways of the Force. "You must learn the ways of the Force if you're to come with me to Alderaan," he said. And then Obi-Wan told Luke about his father, not the truth. The truth would come later, delivered as a weapon that nearly destroyed Luke's spirit. Instead, he told a version of the truth, the story they'd agreed upon 19 years ago. "Your father was a Jedi Knight," Obi-Wan said, his voice heavy with memory, "and he was a good friend. He was the best star pilot in the galaxy and a cunning warrior. I understand you become quite a good pilot yourself. And he was a good friend." Luke had always believed his father died flying cargo ships. Learning he'd been a Jedi Knight, a guardian of peace and justice, filled the young man with wonder and pride. When Obi-Wan presented Luke with Anakin's lightsaber, the weapon Vader had used before Mustafar, before his fall, Luke ignited it with reverence. The blue blade hummed to life, and through it, Luke touched the Force for the first time without realizing it. He wanted to accept immediately, wanted to fly across the galaxy with this mysterious old wizard, learn to use the Force and have adventures like his father. But duty anchored him. The farm needed him. Owen and Beru depended on him, and abandoning them would be selfish. He declined, promising to take Obi-Wan to the nearby spaceport of Mos Eisley, but then returning home. His destiny, it seemed, would wait. Destiny had other plans. When Luke returned to the moisture farm, he found it burning. Stormtroopers, tracking the droids, had questioned Owen and Beru. When his aunt and uncle couldn't or wouldn't provide information, the Empire executed them, leaving their charred skeletons beside the burning homestead. Luke knelt in the ashes of his only family, grief and rage warring in his heart. There was nothing left for him on Tatooine now. "I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father," he told Obi-Wan, his voice hollow with shock and determination. In Mos Eisley's cantina, a wretched hive of scum and villainy, they hired transport from a smuggler named Han Solo and his Wookiee co-pilot Chewbacca. Han piloted the Millennium Falcon, a modified light freighter that looked like a piece of junk but could outrun Imperial Star Destroyers. Han was roguish and cynical, motivated primarily by credits and survival, but beneath his mercenary exterior beat the heart of someone who still believed in something more than money. Their escape from Tatooine involved outrunning Star Destroyers and dodging TIE fighters before jumping to hyperspace. During the journey to Alderaan, Obi-Wan began Luke's training, instructing him in sensing the Force while blindfolded, using a training remote that fired harmless stun bolts. "Your eyes can deceive you," Obi-Wan taught. "Don't trust them. Stretch out with your feelings." Luke felt the Force for the first time as a presence beyond sight, a connection to the universe that guided his instincts. He deflected the remote's bolts blindly, his lightsaber moving through the Force's guidance. They emerged from hyperspace expecting to find Alderaan, a peaceful world of mountains and cities, art and philosophy. Instead, they found an asteroid field, debris the size of moons tumbling through space where a planet should have been. Alderaan was gone, utterly destroyed. The Death Star had tested its primary weapon, reducing billions of lives to rubble and dust in seconds. Among the dead was every person Leia had ever known, her adopted parents, her friends, her homeworld's entire population. The Empire's message was clear. Resistance brought annihilation. The Death Star itself loomed before them, a moon-sized battle station that pulled the Millennium Falcon into its hangar bay through tractor beams Han couldn't overcome. Trapped aboard the Empire's ultimate weapon, the small group formulated a desperate plan. While Obi-Wan went to disable the tractor beam, allowing their eventual escape, Luke and Han would hide in smuggling compartments beneath the Falcon's deck plating. When stormtroopers completed their search and departed, they could explore the station, perhaps accomplish something meaningful before escaping. They learned from R2-D2 that Princess Leia was imprisoned in the detention level scheduled for execution. Luke's arguments for mounting a rescue found support from an unexpected source. Han Solo agreed, though purely from mercenary motives when Luke mentioned the reward a princess could pay. They infiltrated the detention block disguised as stormtroopers, transferring a Wookiee prisoner, blasted their way to Leia's cell and freed her. The princess immediately took charge, recognizing their rescue plan as poorly thought out, but appreciating the attempt. Escaping through garbage compactors and across chasms suspended on cables, fighting stormtroopers while trading quips, this unlikely group began to form bonds deeper than survival demanded. Leia saw beyond Han's mercenary facade to the hero he denied being. Luke found in Leia a strong woman unlike anyone he'd known, her courage and determination matching his own growing confidence. And all of them, even cynical Han, began to feel part of something larger than themselves. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan encountered Darth Vader, the two men who'd once been master and apprentice, brothers in all but blood, faced each other across a corridor. Their lightsabers ignited, Obi-Wan's blue, Vader's red, and they circled each other like planets orbiting a dying star. "I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan," Vader intoned through his mask. "We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master." "Only a master of evil, Darth," Obi-Wan responded. Their duel was nothing like the ferocious battle on Mustafar. This was a conversation between old men who'd once been young together, each strike and parry carrying more weight than physical force could measure. Vader tested Obi-Wan's defense, probed for weakness, while Obi-Wan fought with patient efficiency, conserving strength he no longer possessed in abundance. As Luke and the others raced toward the Millennium Falcon with stormtroopers in pursuit, Luke glanced back and saw the duel. His instinct was to help, but circumstances propelled him forward. Then Obi-Wan did something extraordinary. Seeing Luke watching, the old Jedi Master smiled peacefully. raised his lightsaber in salute and allowed Vader's blade to strike him. Instead of falling dead, Obi-Wan's body vanished, his robes and lightsaber clattering empty to the deck. "No!" Luke screamed, his voice raw with grief and rage. But Obi-Wan's voice echoed in his mind. "Run, Luke, run!" The old Jedi had become one with the Force, achieving a form of immortality the Sith could never understand. His physical body was gone, but his consciousness, his essence, remained able to guide Luke in ways a living mentor never could. They escaped the Death Star, but Luke carried Obi-Wan's sacrifice like a fresh wound. The old man had given his life so Luke and the others could flee, had become something more than mortal in the process. And now, Luke, barely trained, was the closest thing to a Jedi the galaxy possessed. The rebellion analyzed the Death Star plans R2-D2 carried, finding a vulnerability in the station's design. A small thermal exhaust port led directly to the main reactor, its defenses relying on the impossibility of successfully attacking such a small target during battle. But a precise shot could trigger a chain reaction, destroying the station from within. The catch: the target was smaller than a womp rat. The attacking fighters would face massive anti-aircraft fire, and the shot itself required computer-guided precision that even the rebellion's best pilots doubted they could achieve. Luke, an excellent pilot from his time racing through Tatooine's canyons, joined the fighter squadron assigned to make the attack. The Battle of Yavin began with Rebel X-Wings and Y-Wings launching against the Death Star, while it powered its super laser to destroy the moon where the Rebel base hid. Fighters screamed through the Death Star's surface trenches, while TIE fighters pursued them. Darth Vader himself took to the battle in his modified TIE advanced fighter, his force sensitivity making him a devastating pilot. He picked off Rebel fighters with cold efficiency, closing in on Luke's position as the young pilot lined up his final attack run. In those critical seconds, as Luke's targeting computer struggled to lock onto the impossibly small exhaust port, as Vader's finger tightened on his trigger to eliminate this last threat, Obi-Wan's voice echoed through the Force. "Use the Force, Luke. Let go." Luke did something that seemed like madness. He switched off his targeting computer, relying instead on instinct, on that same feeling that had guided him to deflect the training remote's bolts while blindfolded. He reached out with his feelings, sensed the right moment beyond conscious thought, and fired. Before Vader could destroy Luke's X-Wing, the Millennium Falcon emerged from hyperspace, Han Solo having returned despite his earlier insistence on taking his reward and leaving. "You're all clear, kid," Han transmitted. "Now let's blow this thing and go home." The Falcon's weapons destroyed Vader's wingman, sending his TIE spinning into space, and Luke's torpedoes raced down the exhaust port. The Death Star exploded in a fireball visible across the system, billions of tons of metal and technology reduced to expanding debris. The Empire's ultimate weapon, the battle station that had destroyed an entire planet hours earlier, was gone. The rebellion had won its first major victory, proving that the Empire could be defeated, that tyranny wasn't inevitable, that hope still flickered in the darkness. At the ceremony honoring the heroes of Yavin, Luke and Han received medals from Princess Leia, while the assembled rebels cheered. They destroyed the Death Star, rescued a princess, and survived impossible odds. The war was far from over. The Empire controlled thousands of systems and commanded armies beyond counting. But for one moment in that celebration, the galaxy's future seemed bright. Luke didn't know that the Dark Lord he'd inadvertently saved from exploding with the Death Star was his father. He didn't know that Princess Leia was his sister. He didn't know that the simple moisture farmer he'd been weeks earlier would become the galaxy's greatest hope for restoring the Jedi Order. But destiny had set him on this path, and there was no turning back. The next chapter of the Skywalker Saga was about to begin, one that would test Luke Skywalker to his breaking point and reveal truths that would shake his understanding of everything he believed. The destruction of the Death Star sent shock waves through the galaxy, but not the ones the rebellion hoped for. Rather than inspiring mass defections or widespread revolt, the Empire tightened its grip, hunting rebel bases with renewed fury. Darth Vader became obsessed with finding the pilot who destroyed the battle station, the Force-sensitive warrior whose power he'd felt during the battle. The Dark Lord didn't yet realize he was hunting his own son. 3 years after the Battle of Yavin, the rebellion established a hidden base on Hoth, an ice planet in the outer rim where freezing temperatures and constant blizzards provided natural cover from Imperial sensors. The rebels carved their base into glacial caverns, setting up shield generators and defensive positions, trying to buy time to regroup and plan their next move. Luke Skywalker, now a commander in the Alliance military, had grown into his role as leader and warrior, but his Force training remained incomplete. Obi-Wan's death had left him with basic knowledge, but no master to guide his development. One day, while scouting the ice wastes on a Tauntaun, Luke investigated what he thought was a meteorite impact. Instead, he discovered an Imperial probe droid, its sensors already transmitting the base's coordinates to the Empire. Before he could report back, a massive creature called a Wampa attacked him, its ice-white fur blending perfectly with the blizzard. The beast struck with incredible force, knocking Luke unconscious and dragging him to its cave to be stored as food. Luke woke suspended upside down in the Wampa's lair, ice encrusting his wounds, his lightsaber lying in the snow meters away. The Wampa approached, ready to feed, and Luke reached out desperately with the Force, calling his lightsaber to his hand. The weapon flew through the air into his grip, and he ignited it, cutting himself free and severing the Wampa's arm in one motion. He fled into the blizzard, but exposure and blood loss took their toll. Consciousness faded as the temperature plummeted with nightfall. In his delirium, Luke saw Obi-Wan's spirit appear before him, more solid and real than any hallucination should be. "Luke," the ghostly Jedi said, his voice carrying across the howling wind, "you must go to the Dagobah system. There you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me." The vision faded, and Han Solo found Luke barely alive in the snow, using his slain Tauntaun's body cavity for warmth and a shelter through the night. Han saved Luke's life, proving once again that the smuggler's heart was far softer than his cynical exterior suggested. The Empire arrived within days. Admiral Kendall Ozzel, commanding Vader's fleet, emerged from hyperspace too close to Hoth's system, alerting the rebels to the Imperial presence. Vader, displeased with this incompetence, used the Force to choke Ozzel to death via holographic transmission, promoting Admiral Piet to replace him even as Ozzel's body crumpled. The Empire's values were clear. Failure meant death, competence meant survival, and loyalty was purchased through fear. Imperial AT-AT walkers, towering four-legged assault vehicles armored too heavily for rebel blasters to damage, marched across Hoth's frozen plains toward the base. The rebels deployed what defenses they could, snow speeders attacking with harpoons and tow cables, wrapping the walkers' legs and toppling them like mechanical giants. Luke personally brought down several walkers, then used his lightsaber and thermal detonators to destroy another from within after his speeder crashed. The battle bought time for transport ships to evacuate, but Hoth had to be abandoned. Luke escaped with R2-D2 and his X-Wing, setting course not for the Rebel fleet's rendezvous point, but for Dagobah, following Obi-Wan's instructions. The swamp planet appeared uninhabited, covered in mist and murky water, ancient trees dripping with moisture and strange life. Luke's landing was rough, the X-Wing sinking into a bog, and his exploration of this strange world led him to a small mud hut where a tiny green creature lived. This creature seemed half mad, digging through Luke's supplies, speaking in backward sentences, laughing at inappropriate moments. Luke grew frustrated, demanding to know where he could find Yoda. The creature's manner changed, becoming serious. "Looking for someone, yes you are," he said, his voice taking on sudden gravity. Then he revealed himself. "Found someone, you have. 800 years old I am. Your teacher I will be." This was Yoda, the Grand Master who'd trained Jedi for centuries, who'd led the Order through the Clone Wars, who'd fought alongside the greatest warriors the galaxy had known. And Luke's first impression was of a senile, annoying swamp hermit. The lesson in judging by appearances couldn't have been clearer. Yoda initially refused to train Luke, sensing the boy carried too much fear and anger, too much of his father's impatience and recklessness. Only Obi-Wan's spirit, appearing to debate with his old master, convinced Yoda to give Luke a chance. The training that followed pushed Luke to his physical and mental limits. Yoda instructed him to run through swamps carrying the ancient master on his back, to do handstand push-ups while maintaining Force-assisted levitation, to sense life forms through the Force and understand his connection to all living things. "Luminous beings are we," Yoda taught, "not this crude matter." The Force wasn't just a tool for moving objects or enhancing combat. It was the fundamental energy connecting all life, flowing through everything, binding the galaxy together. Luke struggled with the more profound aspects of Force philosophy. When Yoda demonstrated levitation by raising Luke's X-Wing from the swamp, the young Jedi's disbelief prevented him from replicating the feat. "I don't believe it," Luke said in awe. Yoda's response cut to the heart of Force mastery. "That is why you fail." Belief and doubt determined what the Force could accomplish through a Jedi, making a state of mind as crucial as technique. One day, Yoda sent Luke into a cave strong with the dark side, a place of evil where the barrier between reality and nightmare blurred. "What's in there?" Luke asked, fear making his voice tight. "Only what you take with you," Yoda responded cryptically. Luke entered the cave with his lightsaber and blaster and encountered Darth Vader. Their duel was brief but brutal, Luke's rage fueling his strikes until he decapitated Vader with a powerful blow. But when the helmet cracked open, Luke's own face stared back at him from inside Vader's mask. The vision was a warning. If Luke gave in to anger and fear, he would become like Vader, consumed by the darkness he fought against. Before Luke's training could be completed, he experienced terrible visions through the Force. He saw Han Solo and Princess Leia in pain, tortured and suffering, calling out for his help. The visions felt real and immediate, showing his friends in mortal danger. Despite Yoda and Obi-Wan's warnings that this was a trap, that leaving his training incomplete would doom him. Luke couldn't abandon Han and Leia. "I have to save them," he insisted. Yoda's response was sorrowful and prophetic. "If you leave now, help them you could, but you would destroy all for which they have fought and suffered." Luke left anyway, departing Dagobah in his X-Wing with R2-D2, flying toward Cloud City on the planet Bespin. Yoda and Obi-Wan's spirits watched him go. "That boy is our last hope," Obi-Wan said sadly. Yoda's response hinted at secrets yet unrevealed. "No, there is another." The truth in the darkness Cloud City floated among Bespin's clouds, a Tabana gas mining facility operated by Lando Calrissian, Han Solo's old friend and former owner of the Millennium Falcon. Leia and Han had fled there seeking refuge after escaping the Empire's pursuit following Hoth's evacuation. Lando welcomed them warmly, but his hospitality concealed betrayal. Darth Vader had arrived first, forcing Lando to sell out his friends or watch Cloud City be destroyed. Vader's plan was elegant and cruel. He didn't simply want to capture Luke Skywalker. He wanted to break him, to twist him, to transform him into a weapon of the dark side. And the Dark Lord had learned through mysterious means that Luke could be manipulated through those he loved. If Vader tortured Han and Leia, Luke would sense their suffering through the Force and come running into a trap. Then Vader could test whether Luke could be turned or if he needed to be delivered to the Emperor for more intensive corruption. The torture was methodical and horrifying. Han was strapped to a device that sent waves of pain through his nervous system without leaving physical damage, his screams echoing through Cloud City's corridors. Leia was forced to watch, her own suffering psychological as she endured seeing the man she'd fallen in love with systematically destroyed. Chewbacca, the loyal Wookiee, was imprisoned separately, his howls of rage impotent against cell walls. When Luke arrived, he rushed into the city like a hero from ancient stories, lightsaber in hand, determined to save his friends. He found them in time to watch Imperial technicians lower Han Solo into a carbon-freezing chamber, a test to see if the process, normally used for industrial purposes, could successfully freeze a human for transport. "I love you," Leia declared as Han descended into the chamber. Han's response was perfectly him. "I know." The carbon froze him mid-expression, preserving him in carbonite, his face twisted with resignation and love. The process was agonizing, but Han survived, his body encased in a solid block that could be safely transported. Boba Fett, the bounty hunter and son of Jango Fett, claimed Han's frozen form. Jabba the Hutt had placed a substantial bounty on Solo for old debts, and Fett intended to collect. Luke watched helplessly as his friend was taken away, rage building in his heart. Then Darth Vader revealed himself, stepping from the shadows in his iconic black armor, his breathing filling the chamber with mechanical regularity. Their duel began in the carbon-freezing chamber and expanded through Cloud City's industrial underbelly. Vader toyed with Luke, easily deflecting his attacks, using telekinesis to hurl machinery at him, demonstrating the vast gulf between an apprentice's skill and a master's power. "You are not a Jedi yet," Vader taunted, his voice synthesized and cold. Luke's anger grew with each humiliation, his strikes becoming wilder, more aggressive, precisely what Vader wanted. Anger led to the dark side, and the dark side made potential apprentices vulnerable to corruption. Vader drove Luke out onto a gantry suspended over Cloud City's reactor shaft, a dizzying drop into churning energy below. In a moment of overconfidence, Luke attempted a Force-enhanced leap attack. Vader responded with casual precision, his lightsaber severing Luke's right hand at the wrist. The young Jedi's lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber, fell into the reactor shaft along with Luke's severed hand. Luke collapsed on the gantry, cradling his maimed arm, shock and pain overwhelming him. "There is no escape," Vader said, looming over his wounded prey. "Don't make me destroy you, Luke. You do not yet realize your importance. You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training. With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy." Luke refused, his voice weak but defiant. "I'll never join you." Vader delivered the revelation that would shatter Luke's understanding of everything. "Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father." Luke insisted he knew enough. Vader had killed Anakin Skywalker. The Dark Lord's response was delivered with the weight of absolute truth. "No, I am your father." The words hit Luke like a physical blow. No, that's not true. That's impossible." But even as he denied it, Luke felt the truth resonating through the Force, saw the terrible logic of it, understood why Obi-Wan had lied. His father, the hero he'd idolized, the Jedi Knight he'd hoped to emulate, that man had become this monster, this servant of evil, this enforcer of tyranny. Everything Luke believed about his identity, his heritage, his destiny, crumbled in that moment. "Search your feelings," Vader commanded. "You know it to be true." Luke's scream of denial was raw anguish, the cry of someone whose world had just inverted. Vader extended a hand, a gesture that might have been offering help or demanding submission. "Luke, you can destroy the Emperor. He has foreseen this. It is your destiny. Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son." Faced with this impossible choice, join his father in the dark side or die rejecting him, Luke chose a third option. He let go of the gantry and fell into the reactor shaft, choosing death over corruption. His fall seemed to last forever, the reactor's energy swirling around him until emergency vents spat him out into a weather vane dangling beneath Cloud City. He hung there, one-handed, above the planet's clouds, his body broken, his spirit shattered. Through the Force, he called out to the only person who might hear, "Ben, Leia, hear me." Leia, piloting the Millennium Falcon away from Cloud City with Chewbacca after rescuing them from Imperial custody, felt Luke's cry through a Force sensitivity she didn't yet understand. She turned the ship around against all logic, returning to Cloud City despite pursuing TIE fighters, following instinct to a weather vane where they found Luke barely conscious. They hauled him aboard and escaped into hyperspace, Vader sensing his son slipping away and staring after the Falcon with mechanical frustration. Later, aboard the Rebel medical frigate, Luke received a cybernetic hand to replace the one Vader had taken, just as Vader had a mechanical hand after Dooku's attack, just as Anakin had given himself to machinery piece by piece until almost nothing organic remained. The circle continued, father and son marked by similar wounds. Luke stared at his new hand, flexing the fingers, feeling phantom sensations from nerves that no longer existed. He'd learned the truth about his father, and it had nearly destroyed him. Redemption's long road. 1 year passed. Luke had matured from the eager farm boy who'd left Tatooine into something harder, more focused, his journey toward becoming a true Jedi continuing, despite Yoda's warning that his training was incomplete. The rebellion prepared for its greatest gambit, destroying the Empire's second Death Star, currently under construction above the forest moon of Endor. Imperial intelligence suggested this station was still vulnerable, lacking full defensive systems, providing a narrow window for attack. But first, Luke had personal business to settle. Han Solo remained frozen in carbonite, displayed as a trophy in Jabba the Hutt's palace on Tatooine. The rescue plan required patience and coordination, with Luke, Leia, Lando, and Chewbacca infiltrating Jabba's organization over several months, gaining the crime lord's confidence before making their move. Luke returned to the palace as a Jedi Knight, his confidence and power evident in every gesture. He'd constructed a new lightsaber with a green blade rather than his father's blue, symbolizing his growth beyond merely inheriting Anakin's legacy. When Jabba refused to release Han and instead tried to feed Luke to his pet rancor, the young Jedi dispatched the creature with apparent ease, his command of the Force demonstrating the training he'd continued on his own. Jabba's death came aboard his sail barge as he attempted to execute the rebels at the Sarlacc pit, a creature that digested prey over 1,000 years. Luke, Leia, Lando, Han, Chewbacca, and the droids fought their way free, with Leia personally strangling Jabba with the chain he'd used to enslave her. Boba Fett, attempting to stop them, fell into the Sarlacc's maw, his jetpack malfunctioning at the worst possible moment. The explosion of Jabba's barge marked the end of the mission. Han was free, Luke was powerful, and Leia had proven herself as capable as any of them. But Luke couldn't celebrate. He returned to Dagobah, where Master Yoda lay dying in his modest hut, his 900 years finally catching up with him. The ancient master confirmed what Luke had learned from Vader. Your father, he is. But Yoda insisted that Vader was more machine than man, twisted and evil beyond redemption. Luke insisted there was still good in him. Yoda's response was sorrowful. Remember, a Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but beware, anger, fear, aggression, the dark side are they. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Yoda's final lesson concerned another truth Luke needed to know. There is another Skywalker. The ancient master passed into the Force before he could elaborate, his body vanishing as Obi-Wan's had, leaving only his robes behind. Luke emerged from the hut to find Obi-Wan's spirit waiting, ready to provide the explanations Yoda could no longer give. "Why didn't you tell me?" Luke demanded, his anger at the deception still raw. "You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father." Obi-Wan's response revealed the Jedi's comfort with certain truths. "What I told you was true, from a certain point of view. When your father allowed himself to be consumed by Darth Vader, the good man who was Anakin Skywalker ceased to exist. The truth is that Vader killed your father, along with everything he believed in." Then came the revelation about Luke's sister, Leia Organa, the princess he'd admired, the rebel leader he'd fought alongside, was his twin, separated at birth to protect them from their father and the Emperor. "Your insight serves you well," Obi-Wan said when Luke guessed the truth. "Bury your feelings deep down, Luke. They do you credit, but they could be made to serve the Emperor." Luke absorbed this information with resignation. He had a sister, which meant he wasn't the last hope for the Jedi, but it also meant Vader and the Emperor would hunt her if they learned the truth. More immediately, it explained the connection he'd always felt with Leia, the reason he'd been drawn to rescue her, the bond between them that transcended friendship. They were family, the last remnants of the Skywalker bloodline, twins born from love that had curdled into tragedy. The Battle of Endor required a multi-phase attack. A small strike team would land on the forest moon, disable the shield generator protecting the Death Star. Once the shields were down, the Rebel fleet would attack the station itself, destroying it before it could become fully operational. Leia, Han, Chewbacca, and Luke led the ground assault with a team of commandos landing in a stolen Imperial shuttle. On Endor, they encountered the Ewoks, primitive-appearing creatures who lived in tree cities and hunted with stone weapons. Initial contact was rocky. The Ewoks nearly cooked Han in a giant pot before C-3PO, worshipped as a golden god, convinced them to ally with the rebels. Despite their primitive technology, the Ewoks knew their forest better than any Imperial trooper, their guerrilla tactics proving devastatingly effective against the Empire's garrison. Before the shield generator assault, Luke surrendered himself to Imperial troops, intending to confront Vader personally. He believed, despite all evidence to the contrary, that his father could be redeemed, that Anakin Skywalker still existed somewhere inside Darth Vader's armor. The Force told him this was true, and he had to try. His meeting with Vader aboard an Imperial shuttle was tense and intimate, father and son speaking openly for the first time. Luke tried to reach past the armor and machinery to the man beneath. "I know there is good in you," he insisted. "The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully. That's why you couldn't destroy me. That's why you won't bring me to your master now." But Vader's response was cold certainty. "You underestimate the power of the dark side. If you will not fight, then you will meet your destiny." They traveled together to the Death Star, where Emperor Palpatine awaited them in the throne room. The Emperor appeared aged and frail, his features hidden within a dark hood, but his presence in the Force was overwhelming. This was the Sith Master who'd orchestrated the Clone Wars, destroyed the Jedi Order, transformed the Republic into the Empire, and corrupted Anakin Skywalker. And now he intended to corrupt or destroy Luke Skywalker. "Welcome, young Skywalker," Palpatine rasped, his voice like ancient paper crackling. "I have been expecting you. You no longer need those." He gestured dismissively at Luke's restraints, and they fell away without anyone touching them. Luke was free to move, his lightsaber returned to him, but Palpatine clearly feared nothing from this young Jedi. The Emperor revealed his plan with casual cruelty. The Death Star was fully operational, its weapons online despite Rebel intelligence suggesting otherwise. The shield generator on Endor was protected by an entire legion of the Emperor's finest troops, making its destruction impossible. The Rebel fleet, even now approaching the station, was flying into a trap. They would be annihilated, and Luke would watch helplessly as his friends died because he'd believed in redemption rather than accepting reality. Through the throne room's massive viewport, Luke watched the Rebel fleet engage Imperial Star Destroyers while TIE fighters swarmed like insects. The Death Star's superlaser fired, each shot vaporizing a capital ship, thousands of lives extinguished in seconds. Luke's rage built with every explosion, every death he felt through the Force. Palpatine encouraged this anger, feeding it with commentary about how powerless Luke was, how his friends were dying, how his faith had led them to slaughter. "Take your weapon," Palpatine commanded. "Strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey toward the dark side will be complete." Luke's hand moved toward his lightsaber, almost involuntarily. his anger demanding release. Vader stood between Luke and the Emperor, ready to defend his master. But Luke sensed the deeper game. If he struck Palpatine down in rage, the Emperor's essence would possess him, the same Sith ritual that had existed for generations. He would become the next vessel for the dark side's ancient evil. Below, on Endor's forest moon, the tide turned. The Ewoks' primitive weapons proved surprisingly effective against Imperial armor, their knowledge of the forest allowing ambushes the sophisticated Imperial troops never anticipated. Han and Leia's team broke into the shield generator facility, planted explosives, and brought the Death Star's shields down. Suddenly, the impossible rebel victory became possible. Lando Calrissian, commanding the Millennium Falcon, led the fighter assault into the Death Star's superstructure, racing toward the main reactor, while Admiral Akbar's capital ships engaged the Imperial fleet. The battle shifted from hopeless to desperate, from certain defeat to possible victory, and Palpatine's confidence cracked. He had miscalculated, his arrogance blinding him to the possibility that primitive creatures and desperate freedom fighters might overcome military superiority. In the throne room, Luke finally gave in to his rage, attacking the Emperor directly. Vader intercepted him, their lightsabers clashing as the space battle raged beyond the viewports. Father and son dueled through the throne room, Luke's anger giving him dark side strength that matched Vader's power. Their blades locked, faces inches apart, and Vader probed Luke's mind through their force connection. "Sister," Vader said, sudden understanding dawning. "You have a twin sister. Your feelings have now betrayed her too." Vader's realization of Leia's existence, his suggestion that perhaps she could be turned if Luke proved too stubborn, snapped Luke's last restraint. He attacked with fury born of desperate protection, overwhelming Vader's defense through sheer ferocity. His lightsaber strikes drove Vader back, each blow powered by fear for his sister's fate. He drove Vader to the floor, severed his right hand, just as Vader had severed Luke's, and stood over his fallen father with his lightsaber raised for the killing blow. Palpatine laughed with genuine delight. "Good. Your hate has made you powerful. Now, fulfill your destiny and take your father's place at my side." But Luke looked at his own mechanical hand, saw Vader's mechanical hand lying severed nearby, recognized the parallel. He was becoming his father, repeating the same mistakes, walking the same path that had led Anakin to darkness. "Never," Luke declared, deactivating his lightsaber and casting it away. "I'll never turn to the dark side. You've failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me." The Emperor's expression transformed from pleasure to rage. "So be it. Jedi." Force lightning exploded from his fingertips, blue-white energy that coursed through Luke's body with excruciating pain. Luke collapsed, his muscles seizing, his screams echoing through the throne room. Palpatine held nothing back, channeling decades of Sith rage into torturing this Jedi who'd rejected the dark side. "Young fool," the Emperor hissed, "only now at the end do you understand. Your feeble skills are no match for the power of the dark side." Luke lay helpless, dying by degrees, his body burning from the inside out. He looked toward his father, pleading with his eyes for help, even as he knew Vader had watched countless beings tortured and done nothing. But something in Luke's faith, his absolute belief in Anakin Skywalker's continued existence, penetrated the shell of Darth Vader's armor and machinery. For 34 years, Vader had served the Emperor without question, had committed atrocities beyond counting, had become more machine than man. But watching his son die for believing in redemption sparked something Vader thought long dead. Anakin Skywalker reached up, grabbed Emperor Palpatine, and lifted him into the air. The lightning redirected through Vader's systems, frying his life support. But Anakin held firm. He carried the Emperor to the throne room's reactor shaft and hurled him into the depths. Palpatine's scream echoed as he fell, his body still crackling with lightning, until he exploded far below in a burst of dark side energy. The Emperor, who'd orchestrated the Clone Wars, destroyed the Jedi Order, enslaved the galaxy, and seemed invincible, was dead. But Vader's systems were failing. Luke dragged his father toward a shuttle bay, desperate to save him, but Anakin knew his time was ending. "Luke, help me take this mask off," he requested, his voice distorted by the damaged helmet. "But you'll die," Luke protested. "Nothing can stop that now," Anakin responded. "Just for once, let me look on you with my own eyes." Luke removed the helmet, revealing Anakin Skywalker's face for the first time in decades. The man beneath was pale, scarred, barely human after so many years encased in machinery. But his eyes, those blue eyes Luke had inherited, were human and full of something that looked like peace. "Now go, my son," Anakin said softly. "Leave me." Luke insisted he would save Anakin, get him to a medical facility, but his father shook his head. "You already have, Luke. You were right about me. Tell your sister you were right." Anakin Skywalker died in his son's arms, the good man who'd been consumed by Darth Vader, finally emerging at the very end. Luke escaped the Death Star moments before Lando's torpedoes struck the main reactor, the explosion visible across the forest moon as a second star bloomed in Endor's sky. The tyranny that had gripped the galaxy for decades ended in fire and light. On Endor, the rebels celebrated their impossible victory. Leia learned she was Luke's sister and that Darth Vader had been their father, revelations that should have devastated her, but instead explained so much about her own Force sensitivity, her connection to Luke, the emptiness she'd always felt not knowing her biological family. Han Solo, finally forced to confront his feelings openly, committed to remaining with Leia rather than returning to his smuggling life. Lando had proven himself a hero despite his earlier betrayal, and across the galaxy, worlds learned of the Emperor's death and began throwing off Imperial rule. Luke built a funeral pyre for his father, burning the black armor and what remained of Anakin's body in the Ewok tradition. As the flames rose, Luke saw three ghostly figures appear in the Force: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Master Yoda, and beside them, young and whole again, Anakin Skywalker, as he'd been before his fall. The prophecy had come true. Anakin had brought balance to the Force, though not in the way anyone expected. He'd destroyed the Sith by killing Palpatine and himself, leaving only Luke to carry the Jedi tradition forward. The celebration that night seemed like the end of the story, the conclusion of a saga that had begun in slavery and ended in freedom. But the story was not over. The Skywalker legacy would continue through the next generation, and new darkness would rise from the Empire's ashes. The price of peace is eternal vigilance, and the galaxy would soon learn that lesson again. The new generation and ancient evil 30 years passed. An entire generation grew up knowing only stories of the Empire and Jedi, both becoming legends rather than living memory. Luke Skywalker attempted to rebuild the Jedi Order, training a new generation of Force sensitives to protect and serve the New Republic. Among his students was his nephew, Ben Solo, son of Leia Organa and Han Solo. Ben possessed tremendous natural power, inheriting the Skywalker bloodline's Force sensitivity, but he also inherited their vulnerability to darkness, their passion, and intensity. From birth, Leia sensed a dark presence influencing her son, something ancient and malevolent reaching out through the Force to poison Ben's development. She hoped Luke's training might help Ben resist this influence, might provide the structure and discipline to keep him on the light side's path. Unknown to everyone, including Ben himself, Emperor Palpatine had survived his apparent death. Using forbidden Sith techniques, his essence had transferred to a cloned body on the hidden world of Exegol. Broken and failing, sustained by machinery and dark-side energies, Palpatine immediately began plotting his return to power. He created Snoke, a genetically engineered puppet who would serve as his proxy while Palpatine remained hidden. And through Snoke, Palpatine reached out to young Ben Solo, whispering to him through the Force, nurturing his fears and doubts, slowly pulling him toward darkness. The corruption took years to fully manifest. Ben felt isolated, different from other students, burdened by the legacy of being the grandson of Darth Vader. That secret, carefully hidden by his family, was eventually revealed publicly by political enemies of Leia's, devastating Ben's sense of identity. He'd been lied to his entire life, his family concealing the truth that dark-side evil ran in his blood. The revelation that he was descended from one of the galaxy's greatest monsters made Ben question everything about himself. Luke sensed the darkness growing in Ben, and in a moment he would regret forever, entered his sleeping nephew's room and probed his mind through the Force. What he found horrified him. Visions of destruction, death, the potential for Ben to become something as terrible as Vader. In a moment of pure instinct, Luke ignited his lightsaber, standing over Ben with the blade raised. Then sanity returned. What was he doing? He immediately deactivated the weapon, shame flooding through him. But Ben woke in that moment, seeing his trusted uncle standing over him with a lightsaber, and interpreted it as attempted murder. Ben lashed out with the Force, bringing the entire hut down on Luke and fleeing into the night. A lightning storm, whether natural or Force-generated, destroyed Luke's temple, killing several students. Ben, fully consumed by rage and betrayal, killed others himself, then departed with a group of dark side warriors called the Knights of Ren. He took a new name, Kylo Ren, and pledged himself to Supreme Leader Snoke, who offered him what his family apparently wouldn't: acceptance of his darkness, training in its power, and purpose in a galaxy that seemed to have no place for him. The revelation of Ben's fall destroyed the Skywalker Solo family. Leia threw herself into building the Resistance to fight the remnants of Imperial power, reorganizing as the First Order. Han returned to smuggling, unable to face his failure as a father, and Luke, devastated by his nephew's corruption and his role in causing it, exiled himself to Ahch-To, the site of the first Jedi Temple. He severed himself from the Force and waited to die, convinced the Jedi needed to end because their legacy was one of failure. Years later, on the desert planet of Jakku, a young woman named Rey lived as a scavenger, salvaging parts from old starship wrecks. She'd been abandoned there as a small child, left behind by parents who never returned, told to wait for them in the care of a junk dealer named Unkar Plutt. She survived through determination and skill, developing Force abilities she didn't understand, waiting desperately for a family that would never come back. When BB-8, a Resistance droid carrying a map fragment to Luke Skywalker's location, crossed her path, Rey's life transformed. Pursued by First Order forces, she escaped Jakku with a defected stormtrooper named Finn aboard the Millennium Falcon. The ship had been stolen and abandoned on Jakku years earlier, and finding it felt like fate. They were immediately intercepted by Han Solo and Chewbacca, reclaiming their old ship, and drawn into the Resistance's struggle against the First Order. Rey felt pulled toward things she couldn't explain. Luke Skywalker's old lightsaber called to her on Takodana, granting her a terrifying vision of past events and future possibilities. When Kylo Ren captured her, attempting to probe her mind for the map's location, their connection through the Force was immediate and intense. They could sense each other's thoughts and feelings, their Force signatures resonating in ways that suggested something deeper than mere opposition. Han Solo confronted his son on Starkiller Base, the First Order's superweapon built from a converted planet. The weapon dwarfed the Death Stars, capable of firing through hyperspace to destroy entire star systems. Han walked out onto a bridge suspended over an endless drop, calling to his son, begging him to come home. For a moment, Ben Solo emerged, his resolve wavering, his hand on his lightsaber's hilt. Han reached out to take the weapon, a gesture of trust and hope. Then Kylo Ren returned, igniting the blade through his father's torso. Han Solo, smuggler turned general turned father, fell into the abyss below, his death rippling through the Force. Leia felt it across the galaxy, crying out as her husband's life ended, and Rey, already connected to Kylo through their Force bond, felt his pain and conflict intensify. Killing Han hadn't made Kylo stronger, it had torn him apart, leaving him more conflicted than ever. The duel that followed between Rey and the injured Kylo revealed shocking truths. Rey, who'd never held a lightsaber before days earlier, fought Kylo to a standstill, her raw Force power matching his trained skill. When she stopped fighting defensively and allowed the Force to guide her, she drove him back, wounding him severely. Only the planet's destruction as the Resistance destroyed Starkiller Base's core separated them. Rey escaped with Finn, Chewbacca, and the map to Luke Skywalker. She found Luke on Ahch-To, a broken island surrounded by endless ocean, inhabited by bird-like creatures called porgs and the ancient caretakers who maintained the original Jedi Temple's ruins. The legendary Jedi Master had exiled himself, cut himself off from the Force, and wanted nothing to do with Rey, the Resistance, or the galaxy's problems. He'd come to Ahch-To to die, convinced the Jedi were a failed religion whose time had passed. Rey stayed anyway, following Luke around the island, demanding training, showing him the lightsaber that had been his father's and his before that. She told him about the First Order, about Kylo Ren, about the Resistance's desperate need for hope. And she told him something else, though she didn't understand it herself. She and Kylo Ren shared a connection through the Force, a bond that allowed them to see and speak to each other across light years. Supreme Leader Snoke had created this bond deliberately, using ancient Sith techniques to link Rey and Kylo's Force signatures. He intended to use their connection to draw Rey to him, then turn her or destroy her. But the bond was more powerful than Snoke anticipated, creating what was called a Force dyad, two individuals who were one in the Force. their combined power exponentially greater than their individual strengths. Through their connection, Rey saw Kylo's conflict, his pain, his desperate loneliness, and Kylo saw Rey's abandonment, her longing for family, her raw, untrained power. They began to understand each other in ways that transcended their opposition. When Luke refused to train her, when he revealed that he'd considered killing Ben and driven him to darkness, Rey's faith in the legendary Jedi Master crumbled. She chose to leave Ahch-To, flying to confront Snoke directly, convinced she could turn Kylo back to the light. Aboard Snoke's flagship, the Supremacy, Rey surrendered herself to be brought before the Supreme Leader. Snoke, physically deformed and sustained by dark side energies, mocked her hope and naivety. He revealed his role in creating her connection with Kylo, demonstrated his vast force powers by torturing her effortlessly, and brought Kylo into the throne room to execute her as a test of his commitment to darkness. But Kylo Ren had other plans. In one fluid motion, using the Force to manipulate Luke's lightsaber lying on Snoke's armrest, Kylo ignited the blade through Snoke's torso, bisecting the Supreme Leader before he could react. The throne room exploded into violence as Snoke's red-armored Praetorian guards attacked both Rey and Kylo. Fighting side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized through their Force bond, they destroyed the guards. Then Kylo made his offer. The First Order, the galaxy itself, could belong to them. They could rule together, letting the past die, creating something new that transcended Jedi and Sith. "You have no place in this story," Kylo told Rey. "You're nobody, a scavenger from a junk planet, but not to me." He extended his hand, offering her everything: power, purpose, and an end to her loneliness. But Rey couldn't accept, couldn't join him in tyranny even if he believed their rule would be benevolent. She refused his hand, tried to take the lightsaber through the Force, and their competing pulls tore the weapon in half. Rey escaped the Supremacy aboard Snoke's personal shuttle. On the mineral planet of Crate, she helped evacuate the last surviving Resistance members, while Kylo, now Supreme Leader of the First Order after Snoke's death, led an assault to wipe them out. Luke Skywalker appeared to confront his former student, projecting himself across the galaxy through the Force in a feat of power that defied understanding. The confrontation between master and former apprentice was brief but profound. Luke apologized for failing Ben, warned him that striking him down would leave him forever haunted, and withstood an entire First Order assault without harm. Then Kylo realized the truth. Luke wasn't physically present, just a Force projection. By the time Kylo understood, the Resistance had escaped through secret tunnels, saved by Luke's sacrifice. On Ahch-To, Luke Skywalker collapsed from the effort, looked out at the twin suns setting over the ocean, and became one with the Force. Rey grieved for the mentor she'd barely known, but his sacrifice hadn't been wasted. The legend of Luke Skywalker confronting the First Order alone spread across the galaxy, inspiring resistance, rekindling hope. The sacred Jedi texts Luke had kept on Ahch-To now traveled with Rey, who would continue training herself using their knowledge. Over the next year, Rey trained under General Leia Organa, the last of the original trilogy's heroes, still fighting. Their bond grew strong, Leia teaching Rey both Force techniques and leadership skills. But Rey was haunted by visions and by the continuing connection with Kylo. Their bond hadn't broken with Snoke's death. If anything, it grew stronger. They could speak across the galaxy, even physically touch through their connection, their force powers bridging impossible distances. Then came Palpatine's message. Broadcast across the galaxy through every communications channel, the Emperor's voice announced his return. At last, the work of generations is complete. The great era is corrected. The day of victory is at hand. The day of revenge. The day of the Sith. Impossible. Dead for decades, yet somehow Emperor Palpatine had returned, and he commanded a fleet of Star Destroyers on Exegol, each equipped with planet-destroying weapons. Kylo Ren reached Exegol first, navigating the treacherous Red Honeycomb Zone to find Palpatine's throne world. There, in a massive Sith citadel surrounded by thousands of cultists, Kylo discovered the truth. Palpatine had created Snoke, had been manipulating Kylo his entire life, had orchestrated everything to corrupt the Skywalker bloodline. The Final Order fleet surrounding them, thousands of Zistan-class Star Destroyers, would be Kylo's to command if he completed one task: kill Rey. Rey, meanwhile, learned her own terrible truth. She wasn't nobody, as Kylo had claimed. She was Palpatine's granddaughter, descended from the Emperor through a failed clone body that had somehow produced offspring. Her parents, trying to protect her from Palpatine's cult, had hidden her on Jakku before being murdered by assassins. Rey wasn't just some scavenger who happened to be Force-sensitive. She was literally bred from Sith genetics, her raw power inherited from the galaxy's most evil tyrant. The revelation devastated Rey. Everything she'd believed about herself was wrong. Her power came from darkness, from evil. She was destined to become the next vessel for Palpatine's immortal essence, the Emperor planning to transfer his spirit into her body as he'd done across generations. When she traveled to Exegol to confront him, using Kylo's ship after their connection allowed her to destroy his TIE fighter, she walked into the Emperor's trap. But Leia Organa, dying aboard the Resistance flagship, reached out one final time through the Force to her son. Her call shattered whatever remained of Kylo Ren's facade, allowing Ben Solo to emerge fully for the first time in years. He had a memory vision of his father, Han Solo, speaking to him with love rather than judgment, reminding him it wasn't too late to change. Ben threw his red lightsaber into the ocean, renouncing the dark side, becoming again the person he'd been before corruption, before fear, before betrayal. On Exegol, Rey faced Palpatine alone, while the Resistance fleet battled the Sith Eternal Armada above. The Emperor, sustained by dark rituals and machinery, drew upon the life force of the cultists surrounding his throne. When Ben Solo arrived to help Rey, their Force dyad created power. Palpatine had been waiting for. He siphoned their combined life energy, restoring himself to full power, becoming younger, stronger, whole again. He cast Ben into a chasm, leaving Rey to face him alone. Dark side lightning exploded from Palpatine's hands, powerful enough to disable every ship in the battle above, Resistance and Sith Eternal alike. Fighters crashed, and capital ships listed dead in space as the Emperor demonstrated power that transcended anything previously witnessed. "I am all the Sith," he declared, channeling the accumulated darkness of generations. Rey, dying from the Emperor's assault, heard voices through the Force. All the Jedi who'd ever lived reached out to her, their spirits offering strength and support. Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Luminara Unduli, and countless others stretching back through millennia. "Be with me?" Rey pleaded, and they were. She stood wielding both Luke and Leia's lightsabers and declared her own truth. "I am all the Jedi." Palpatine's lightning struck her raised blades and reflected back upon him. His own power turned against him. The Emperor's body disintegrated, his essence finally destroyed beyond any possibility of return. The Sith's existence, stretching back thousands of years, ended in that moment. But Rey collapsed, her life force depleted. Ben climbed from the chasm, crawled to her side, and did what Anakin had never been able to do. He gave his own life to save the one he loved. Using their force bond and his own vitality, Ben healed Rey completely, bringing her back from death's edge. She opened her eyes, saw his face, no longer conflicted or angry but peaceful, and kissed him. Then Ben Solo faded, becoming one with the Force, his sacrifice ensuring that something good came from the Skywalker bloodline's darkness. The battle was won. The Sith were destroyed. The First Order collapsed. Across the galaxy, worlds rose up against Imperial remnants, citizens reclaiming their freedom. The Skywalker Saga, which had begun with a slave boy on Tatooine believing in freedom and compassion, had ended with his grandson giving his life to save another, breaking the cycle of darkness that had haunted the family for generations. Rey traveled to Tatooine, to the Lars homestead where Luke Skywalker had once dreamed of the stars. She buried both Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sand, giving them rest beside the home they'd been born knowing would never be theirs. An old woman passing by asked Rey her name. Rey looked at the twin suns, the same suns that had set on Shmi's death, on Luke's dreams, on Anakin's fall. She felt the presences of Luke and Leia beside her in the Force, saw their spirits smiling, and she made a choice about her identity. "Rey Skywalker," she said, claiming the name of the family who'd chosen her, who'd trained her, who'd given her purpose beyond her blood. Not Rey Palpatine, forever tainted by her grandfather's evil, but Rey Skywalker, heir to a legacy of redemption. She ignited her own lightsaber, newly constructed with a yellow blade that symbolized her path forward. Neither Jedi nor Sith, but something new, something that learned from the past's mistakes while honoring its truths. The twin suns set over Tatooine, just as they had for generations. The Skywalker bloodline had ended with Ben Solo's sacrifice, but the Skywalker legacy, hope in the face of darkness, love that transcends fear, redemption available even to the fallen, would continue through Rey and those who came after. The saga was complete, the circle closed, balance finally achieved not through destruction, but through the choice to love rather than hate, to hope rather than despair, to sacrifice rather than dominate. And so, as you drift into sleep tonight, remember the story of the Skywalkers, a family whose choices, both light and dark, shaped the fate of the galaxy. Remember that redemption is always possible, that love can overcome evil, that even in the darkest times, hope remains. The Force will be with you always. Thank you for joining us on this complete journey through the Skywalker Saga. If you enjoyed this bedtime story spanning generations and galaxies, please like this video and subscribe to Sith Lore for more Star Wars content to fall asleep to. May the Force be with you always.